Hey everyone, Chris here. A word before we get started. The show you're about to hear is one we recorded in late August before we got suddenly consumed with a series of reboot specials and then the actual premiere of the new show. But now that Ben and the gang are on hiatus, we're going to return to our traditional show schedule. And that means we'll be releasing new episodes here on the main feed every other week and dropping new Patreon bonus content during the off weeks. We'll be doing this until the new series returns in the first week of January. So all of you patrons supporting us at the $5 Leaper level or above, look to your bonus feed next week for a special Matt, Allison, and I did, breaking down the original reboot pilot script and, more importantly, Sam's appearance in it. What might have been. And while we're on the subject of patrons, we have a few new ones to welcome on board, so let's give it up for Thomas Ahern. Thomas supports us at the $5 Leaper level, and I believe Thomas also won one of our Captain Archer promotional postcards during the Mirror Image Feedback special, so thank you, Thomas, for coming on board as a patron. We also would like to thank Charles from Texas, who also joins us at the $5 Leaper level. Now, at that $5 level, Charles and Thomas will get access to that exclusive Patreon bonus content that I mentioned earlier, and they will also become members of our Quantum Leap Podcast Book Club, meaning that they will get a free Quantum Leap Podcast Book Club bookmark, which is maybe my favorite thing on earth, and especially apropos as today's show is a book review show. We also welcome new patron Max Plaska, who joins us at the $10 Old Boy level. That means in addition to getting the bookmark and access to the Patreon bonus content, I will also interview him for our exclusive Old Boy bonus show, where I talk to Quantum Leap fans about their Quantum Leap fandom. Thank you to Thomas, Charles, and Max for your pledge of support, and to all of our patrons. If you'd like to pledge your support, you can do so at patreon.com/quantumleappodcast. Now, one final thing. Since we recorded this show so long ago, you'll hear us refer to the new series in the future tense as it hadn't yet premiered. So sometimes podcasting is funny that way. On with the show.
Greetings, Dr. Beckett. Welcome to the Quantum Leap Podcast.
Theorizing that one could time travel within his own lifetime, Dr. Sam Beckett stepped into the Quantum Leap Accelerator and vanished. He awoke to find himself trapped in the past, facing mirror images that were not his own, and driven by an unknown force to change history for the better. His only guide on this journey is Al, an observer from his own time, who appears in the form of a hologram that only Sam can see and hear. And so Dr. Beckett finds himself leaping from life to life, striving to put right what once went wrong, and hoping each time that his next leap will be the leap home.
You are listening to the Quantum Leap Podcast. This is episode 123, Search and Rescue.
Welcome to the Quantum Leap Podcast, everyone. I'm Christopher DeFilippis.
I'm Allison Pregler.
And I'm Matt Dale.
And it's time for yet another meeting of the QLP Book Club. Today, the book club convenes to discuss Book 5 in the Quantum Leap novel series, Search and Rescue by Melissa Crandall.
Wow.
Yes.
How are we this far through already? I thought this was going to take ages. Book 5.
It's just been flying by.
Yeah. I feel like, we're actually, we're setting a production schedule and we're sticking to the production schedule. It's not heard of. It's just not done.
God dang.
I hate so.
It's a lot of reading.
It's like we transported back years and years ago. When we were starting, we're like, weekly, let's do it.
Oh, I remember those days.
I'm very proud of us.
Yeah.
I'm also very proud to say that not only will we be discussing Search and Rescue by Melissa Crandall, we will also be featuring an encore of an interview that we did with Melissa Crandall a while back. Hayden, our producer, Hayden McQueenie, interviewed Melissa as part of a segment that they were doing before we joined the show, guys. It was called a novel concept, where they would discuss the books with the authors of the books.
Oh, man.
Yeah, Melissa joined the show for that. In that interview, which I re-listened to earlier today, she discusses her inspiration for Search and Rescue, how she got it published, her other work that she's doing, and her approach to the story, the characters. So it was a pretty neat conversation that she had with Hayden. I enjoyed it. I'm sure you listeners out there will enjoy it as well, so stay tuned for that after the break.
Oh man, I can't wait to re-listen to that one. I don't remember it at all. I know I must have listened to it.
Yeah,
So
I'm looking forward
I can't wait
to
to find out what her process was.
I gotta say though, I don't know, I'm not the one that's about to speak to her, and this is like an interview from years ago, but I suddenly feel very self-conscious about some of my notes. It's like she's here.
Yeah. She's here judging you.
Yeah, it's tough. I'm gonna, listen, I can't speak for every Quantum Leap author, but in this case I will. We all wrote these books 30 years ago. If you're still precious about it now, I'm sorry. I can't wait for you guys to rip Foreknowledge apart just for what it's worth. I always think it's hilarious because you have the benefit of time and distance. So you can look at stuff that you've done in the past a lot more objectively than stuff that you hold near and dear now because it's so fresh. So yeah, there are, issues with this book, and I think we are justifiably we have an obligation to get into some of those issues for any book and any, listen, Tommy Thompson, one of the best friends of the show ever. Blood Moon, abominable. Blood Moon, we did nothing but shit all over Blood Moon, and Tommy was the first one to go, yep, that's right.
Yeah, he's like...
he owned it.
It wasn't his proudest hour, was Blood Moon.
Now,
you know what? I respect all the authors for what they've done. I think it's pretty awesome to be able to say that you've made a Quantum Leap book.
Yeah.
It is kind of tougher to critique these versus episodes because books fall largely on one person's shoulders versus a television show, which has many, many different elements going into it, which isn't to say the books didn't have other elements besides the authors, but it is kind of difficult. But yeah, I mean, all the books have their pros and cons. I certainly have a ton to say about Search and Rescue, and I'm really looking forward to hearing that interview again. Honestly, I want to hear more about her process because this is truly one of my favorite books of the series.
That's great. Yeah, I feel like by prefacing this discussion with that caveat that this is going to be all bad somehow, it's not. So rest assured on that score. I just, I feel weird too because, they're fellow authors and they work hard and we're going to have things to say. And it's just they could be listening right now. The odds of one of the writers from the TV show listening are pretty slim. But, if I knew that a podcast was reviewing my book or got wind of it, I would listen to it in a heartbeat. So,
you'd be all over that. You'd be like, who's talking about my book? 2-hour podcast talking about my book? Hell yeah, strap in.
I know one of my favourite novels coming up, which isn't yours, Chris. Oh, yours is one of my favourites as well, but one of the ones that's my favourites that's not yours. And I'm not going to name it yet, but I know the novel itself got shat upon by the reviews at the time, by the fan reviews, and I've spoken to the author quite recently, and it really hurts her.
Aww.
But I've given her my feedback, which is much more positive.
I'm curious what book it is now.
Yeah, well, we'll find out when we come to it. But I gave her my review, which was much more positive, and she seemed to be quite touched by that. So I don't know if the fact that my positive comments lifted her up, if the negative comments still get to her. So yeah, I don't know how Melissa would feel hearing some of the things we're going to say, but like Chris says, it's been 30 years. We need to unpack this.
Yeah, I mean, no matter what we say about any of these books, writing's hard.
Yeah,
it's hard.
Yeah,
it's just difficult to put all of your thoughts to paper, and you got to stay true to the characters and something that you think other people will enjoy, and try and create a story that is more than just a 40-minute television episode. You got to fill 200-something pages with interesting things, with interesting side characters too. You're creating new people to try and get them invested in and hope that this is something that everyone else will follow along with you. So regardless of whether you think it worked or not, I didn't like The Wall at all. There's some other novels I really didn't like. I still respect the authors. There's nothing personal against them. I think putting themselves out there and dedicating the time and energy to something, they have to be a fan of this. They have to really enjoy Quantum Leap like we do. And they put a lot of themselves out there with their writing. So yeah, respect.
and keeping Quantum Leap alive. This was effectively season 6. That's amazing.
Yeah, we get more Quantum Leap. How can we complain? Even if we don't like the book, it's still complain. More Quantum Leap. Heck yeah, Quantum Leap. And I really do. I enjoy the books as a medium. I've talked about this before. I enjoy the books as a medium in different ways than the show because you really do get to dig deeper into the characters than the show ever really could. And this book is a perfect example of that. So I really like those aspects of the novels.
Yeah. So why don't we start where we usually start by reading the back cover blurb. Allison, you kind of regaled us with it at the end of the Double Identity show. Do you want to reprise your role here, or shall I take over?
Oh, man, I can do it. I got it. I had it ready this time.
All right.
When trapped between two storms, survival becomes a leap of faith. The thunder rolls over the desert in New Mexico, and Sam Beckett leaps into a man named Philip Payne, a doctor involved in the search for a plane that went down in the wilds of British Columbia. The lightning flashes, and Project Observer Al Calavici also leaps into a passenger on the plane. Now Sam must race against time and the forces of nature for the sake of a father and a daughter at bitter odds, and for the life of his friend. Quantum Leap, Search and Rescue, an all-new adventure, first time in print.
What? Nice. A double leap?
Double leap!
Total season 6 stuff.
Wow, yeah. It's funny you posit that season 6. What could be more gimmicky? It's like gimmick on steroid. Double leap.
We're getting deep into the book gimmicks since I love it!
Well, why don't we start where we always do, initial impressions. Allison Pregler, your initial thoughts on Search and Rescue.
I love this book. I love this book so much. You're always going to get me with an Al Leap, okay? You're always going to get me with an Al Leap. This is nothing but Al Leap stuff. It's absolutely insane. This book is insane. I'm just going to say it swerved on me the first time I read it. I'm like, what is going on? I got some issues. It's not perfect. But it's just such an enjoyable read. I read this all in one go this time around. I don't know the next time I will ever read a book in one go, but I was able to just right through this one.
Well, that's pretty high praise. How about you, Matt?
Yeah, I read it all in one go as well.
Oh, show off.
Yeah. I feel like my initial impressions should go on for about 10 or 15 minutes as I paint a clear word picture of the room around me, my mental state, the gauze of the microphone in front of me, every possible element of everything that I can see and hear and feel before I eventually get to some kind of point. And then...
What did the mist in the mountains look like? I wasn't clear on that one.
Then you might have an idea what my initial impressions are. There's a lot to love about this book. There is a lot to love. And yeah, I'm looking forward to getting into some of the positive stuff. But it is a 10-page story that's stretched out to 250 with a lot of adjectives. Wow. Yes. There was some speed reading going on for this one, I'm afraid.
I'm going to be honest. When I got to the descriptions of the mountains, I've read this once before. I was like, I think I got it.
Yeah.
So there was some skimming going on at some point.
There's an entire chapter that's a dream sequence, for goodness sake. But again, we'll come on to that. Yeah. Okay. So there's some good stuff, but it's just a little stretched.
Well, I kind of feel like we're all in the same space here because I really did enjoy this book for the most part. I think Melissa gets Sam and Al right. I think as right as we've seen them in the novel series yet. I really enjoy adventure stories like this.
Oh, we read a different book.
You say that every time. But because I like adventure stories like this and the scope of the story really grabbed me, I liked all the ancillary characters. I liked hating some of the ancillary characters. That being said, as Matt alluded to, this book is overwritten AF to the point of distraction through a lot of it. And the other major issue I have with this book is for the sake of the story, it largely ignores a lot of established Quantum Leap lore and canon, and we'll go into that as well. But maybe we'll start with a tiny synopsis here. Beyond the cover blurb, there are 2 leapies in this. Sam is leapt into a doctor named Philip Payne.
Another Philip.
Yeah, another Philip.
Philip
This
in the
is
last
the second
one, too.
Philip in a row.
Yeah.
And Philip is escorting his friend Eric Freeman to see if they can help find and rescue Eric's daughter, Lindell. And this is where Al's leap comes in. Al is on the plane as a geology student named Gordon Huckstep. Lindell is an associate of his who's a photographer, and they're in there with a cast of characters on the plane that goes down in the mountains of British Columbia. This takes place in March of 1986, and I believe that this is the second book that takes us out of the country.
Yeah, very worldly. I know that was something Ginger was looking for, too. I remember reading something, I believe, from Helen Earl, who is a fanfic writer who submitted some of her stories for the novel range, and one of the things that she said that Ginger had told her was that they were looking for more worldly type of leaps, so we do see that in some of the novels, them going outside of the US.
I gotta say, speaking as a Brit, like, I know technically the US and Canada are different places. I'm not stupid. But from my vantage point, it's hardly exactly going to the other side of the world. There ain't
that culture
when
shock.
Al realizes, is it Al or Sam? When one of them realizes where they are and it says, Canada? ? Like, really? Canada? That's... Okay. All right.
They got weird coins instead of bills! Toonies and loonies!
Who can take serious money called a loony? It's
a
like
loony.
You can bring Monopoly money over the border and they'll take that too.
Yeah, they should have had a French Canadian in there being like, oh, we are more French than the French. It would be pretty accurate, I think.
No Canadians were harmed, or French Canadians were harmed in the making of this episode, yet.
Yeah, there were a lot of different worldly people in this, actually. And so are you still doing the summary? I should let you finish.
No, I think that was it. Basically, the plane goes down. One end of the leap is Al trying to help the group of crash survivors survive. And the other part is Sam with this father trying to find him. And the mission of both leaps is basically to get Lindell, the daughter, and Eric, the father, to reconcile. The end. So, I mean, that's right. Really all you need to know for the broad strokes of the story.
That explanation highlights one of the big issues that I have with the novel, which is, yeah, fine, double leap, very cool, nice and gimmicky, but Sam and Al are separated for the vast majority of it. And
yeah.
I hate to be one of those. I know there's people at the moment saying there's a new series coming, Quantum Leap isn't Quantum Leap without Sam and Al. That's not true. The new series will be fine without Sam and Al. But the original series was Sam and Al, and it was that relationship.
Yeah.
And just sidelining that for 99% of the book was an interesting experiment. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, that was, I think, one of my big issues of the book, too, is because the Sam and Al interplay is really one of the big parts of the show that makes it so appealing. And because they aren't together for the entire thing, it's basically just the last, few pages or so that they get to interact at all, which is really kind of, it feels like a waste if you're going to have Al join Sam on a leap, but they're not on the leap together. It's like, well, you could have had them together on a leap on some, that would have been really interesting to see. But they do have some good stuff, good introspective stuff from the characters. This is really more of an Al story than a Sam story. It's about 54 pages in before Sam shows up at all. And a lot of it is just Al thinking over things that relate to his character as he's going through this leap.
Well, I gotta say, it didn't really even strike me as something missing from the book, not having the interaction between them, because I felt that just the scope and the ambition of the type of story she wanted to tell, it made it necessarily different. It's a different kind of Quantum Leap story. But for all that, I enjoyed her characterization of Sam. I enjoyed her characterization of Al. The fact that we didn't get much interplay between the two didn't even really occur to me, because I think that they're both strong characters in their own right, and I like reading about both of them. So Quantum Leap to me is about Sam and it's about Al. The interplay between the two is integral to the show, but I think the characters stand alone just as well.
Oh, they're doing a lot of thinking about each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are.
They're doing a lot of thinking about each other. There is no doubt in my mind reading this book that these characters don't have such a tight-knit relationship because they're constantly thinking about how much that they mean each other. Like, Al's always thinking about, like, I can't die before I see Sam again. I just have to see Sam again. I would die for Sam. Like, and Sam is just like, he's like, the only reason I'm going to survive this is because of Sam. And Sam is like just so worried about Al. He's having these nightmares about how he didn't get to him in time. There's like a dream sequence where like Al shows up in a suit and he's all covered in blood and guts. And he's like, Al, I didn't save him. And it's just so great. I love the moments like that, and it's just littered throughout this whole book.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff like that. It still makes it a challenge, I think, to get through without that interplay. But it makes it almost worth it for those kind of moments. Particularly, that line you mentioned about saying, I don't want to die until I've seen Sam one more time.
It's like,
Chris.
It was just so good.
Can we go back to something, though? Because you've mentioned twice now how much you love the characterization of Sam and Al.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I got into Quantum Leap when I was a 12-year-old boy. And reading this, the characterization of Al really took me back to myself at that age. Like, he calls Gushy on, like, what, page 2, page 3, a little dweeb?
Yeah,
his code word at Quantum Leap is SEX. Because sex is funny.
Sex. That's such a bad password.
Oh my god. He physically threatens Gushy at one point. I did not. I found Al to be quite puerile until he got to the point where, like, he wasn't in a good shape in the leap itself. But
all right. Okay, you know what? You're now exposing the exact sequence in which I read this book and how I absorbed this book. I started reading, and what you're talking about, Matt, takes place literally in like the first 7 pages.
Yeah.
I started reading this book errantly while at work between, doing other work stuff because I was afraid that I wasn't going to be able to read it in time for the podcast. And I literally got to about page 7, and all of my notes for that part of the book basically jive with what you say. Oh, come on. He's just so horny for Tina.
Just thinking about the woman made it difficult to walk.
Right. It made it difficult to walk. And I was just like, this book is going to be absolute crap. And then I had to put the book down. Okay. And then I picked it up. I picked it up again last night. And from that point on, it's basically where Al leaps. Now, I have a lot of problems with the parameters of that happening at all. But it's from the point beyond all that, which I read like a week ago, to where Al leaps, and then it's just basically Al in the wilderness acting like Al. So that's where the dividing line is here for me, and that's why I think like the characterization, those first few pages, it's a little bit flippant and just a little bit, I don't know.
It was kind of all over the place in the beginning of the book. He's he's just thinking about his entire backstory during that moment. Like, he has a lot on his mind, so he's just thinking about everything. I do love that Al's the kind of character that can be like, okay, here is like, a survival mission, and we got to get down to brass tacks. We got to do what we need to do, get everyone out of this and safe. He goes into soldier mode, right? But then he's also the kind of character who's like, I got to go take a whiz now because I was scared shitless in that plane crash. And then he goes out and he starts hearing, and I want to talk about this too. He starts hearing Ziggy in his head, but he doesn't know what it is. He hears this like buzzing noise. He thinks it's a mosquito, and he's like, no mosquito's gonna get my pecker. It's like, get my dick while I'm taking a whiz. Get out of here, stupid mosquito. I love it kind of hangs back and forth between that, like the kind of juvenile stuff and the more serious stuff that Al's been through. And I think that's great for Quantum Leap. Quantum Leap really needs like deep tragedy with comic relief. If it's too much of one or the other, you kind of lose me. There needs to be a good balance there.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and I think that, Al, again, having those kinds of thoughts, even though in the beginning it's a bit more lascivious and a bit more, I guess, less artful. Let's say it that way. It's cruder. Let's just put it out. It's cruder. He's a little bit cruder in the beginning.
Yeah, he doesn't have time to be crude after the crash.
Right. Right. Yeah. Some of those crude aspects, that's part of who Al is. And that's part of what was, especially seeing him in like season 1. Some of the stuff he says in season 1, it's just like, I'm glad they throttled that back a little bit.
Yeah, you'll bounce back like a pimp's suspenders.
Right. There's precedent for it, you know?
Sure.
So I'm not going to take her to task too much for that, because I just feel like she was sort of reveling in the fact that she's getting to write Al, and she's having so much fun doing it. And this is not where I have an issue. Where I have an issue is just her complete disregard for everything we've ever seen at the project to fit the parameters to make her story work.
Oh, yeah. Well, this underground facility suddenly has a bunch of windows in it?
It's got a balcony.
A balcony? This is a weird setup.
So I think we've established in Killing Time that they're at least 8 stories down, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. They definitely wouldn't have any windows.
Right. So we get for the sake of this story, though, we need a lightning strike, because how else is Al gonna leap?
I mean, they could have said it like it struck some of the equipment and maybe went through that. I mean, no matter which way you slice it, it's magic lightning, but that's established in the show. They could have had different ways than going through a window.
The project does have some above ground and some below ground stuff, because yes, there's the Killing Time stuff, but there's also the season 2 Saga Cell weird building thing, and I'm sure a couple of the other novels refer to stuff that happens above ground as well. So I don't have a big issue with that. There's also the glowing mountain. The glowing mountain is obviously above ground as well.
Yeah.
So,
but I always see the control room and everything that we actually see at the project as being deep underground. Like that is a self-contained thing. I'm thinking of now the control room in the Melissa Crandall universe having like these giant high ceilings, like, 18-foot ceilings with a row of windows along the top. And all of a sudden you can see the weather, and you can, when the lightning comes in, now they're long, narrow windows. It's not like, because she's going to go and lean his head out the window and say, "Hey, nice weather we're having today." It's much more sort of a vaulted chamber in this, in the way I saw it.
Like a modern Frankenstein kind of scene.
Yeah, sure.
Less gothic, more futuristic, but that kind of look.
Yeah, I mean, it could have just hit the equipment, or it could have worked like it did on the show, where the lightning is really on Sam's end, and whatever his connection with Al does whatever. But I guess it didn't. I mean, it didn't switch them this time around, so I guess it was a different thing. I don't know. What can't lightning do?
Lightning is a good cure-all for plot devices. It's just stuck as to where to go next.
I love this. The science of this book is nothing. It's nothing. Sometimes there's just no explanation for anything, and that's great, because that's exactly how I'd write it. I'd be like, I don't know, lightning did it. A wizard did it. Whenever you have a question, a wizard did it.
That's basically the only thing in the Quantum Leap Bible. They didn't really have a show Bible, except for the fact that lightning is your friend. That was it.
But you know what? The thing is, though, Melissa Crandall did put in a lot of research for this book. You could tell by who she thanks in the acknowledgments at the beginning. She's got the Canadian Consulate General, Canadian Map Office. I think she did some medical research as well, because there's some medical stuff going on later in the book. So she did take the time to look up how these certain things work. I guess you really don't have a lot of reference for how does time travel work. So I guess you got to just kind of make it up and hope people buy it.
Yeah, she talks about that real world research and sort of the lengths that she went through to make those portions of the book as realistic as possible. But when you're back at the project, you can basically play to your heart's extent. I just want to see it jive with what we've learned about the project on screen. And this doesn't. They don't seem to have a waiting room here. It seems like Sam's body is just lying on the floor of the accelerator chamber between leaps.
Yeah, they've gone back to the mind leap in this one specifically.
Oh, total mind leap. Yeah, total mind leap in this. Yeah. And the thing that, maybe I can buy that, because I think it was Melanie's book that also posited that you have to go through the accelerator to get to the imaging chamber. So maybe it's not laid out the way I see it in my head. Who knows? But then there's this thing where Gushy is saying Ziggy's having trouble bringing the leapy through. So we know that Sam is leaped, but somehow Ziggy brings the leapy through so that they can then locate Sam. It's just What?
I don't know about how the way the project works in the story.
I'm in two minds about that whole sequence because, yeah, it's very inconsistent with the series, but it's so well written and so exciting. That whole first chapter, aside from the Al stuff that I have an issue with, I think that whole first chapter is so exciting. I was gripped. Part of my mind was gripped. The other part of my mind was trying to play it back against things like Killing Time and figure it all out. But if you forget the previous lore, it's really damn exciting. She owns the fact that she's just going to make it up as she goes along and writes some really good stuff around it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. There's like Al talking to Philip and then trying to determine like who this guy is. There's something about how like Philip just starts puking, and apparently that's just normal with Leapies. Like, just start puking, and like, and they're like, well, Sam's not here. There's just the body here, and if we can't get Sam here, if we shut down the project, then we could lose him forever. There's all that stuff going on. That's kind of exciting, and Al is worried about him, and
it's tense as shit.
Yeah, this is a dire situation.
But she set it up this way just to give Al a reason to be in the accelerator chamber to get struck by lightning. Sure. It's as simple as that. It's just the story mechanics demanded it. So therefore, we're going to change the parameters of the project to accommodate that.
Yeah.
And
I mean, she could have written that he was in the waiting room when it happened, and it would have made as much sense. It really didn't, I guess, matter where he was.
I don't know. I feel like if you're going to leap from Project Quantum Leap, you should be in the accelerator chamber. But he did it in the imaging chamber in the leap back.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
there's really no rule here. Maybe Melissa can be lauded for trying to make it a bit more realistic than the show did. At least he's in the accelerator when he leaps.
Yeah,
I don't know.
You know, I thought it was kind of an interesting description. This was almost a throwaway thing that was thrown in when Al's in there and he's just thinking about stuff before he comes in and finds all the shits hit the fan. It says that he felt safe at the project from the paranoia that haunted him for so long after his return from Vietnam. He felt safe at the project. It's interesting.
Al has PTSD and suffers paranoia.
Oh, there's a ton of PTSD going on in this book.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of specific instances in the series when we see Al as paranoid. We've seen him as, like, comedically scared at different supernatural stuff. That's not really paranoia.
Glitter Rock, he thought everyone did it. He was kind of paranoid about that.
Yes.
I'm just trying to think of like Al at his wit's end, like truly paranoid, not because it's a ghost, but because, you know, it's really triggering something deep within him.
Blood Moon.
Those experiences with vampires in Vietnam.
He was paranoid the vampire's gonna get him.
He was at the Hanoi Hilton when he first met a vampire. Takes him
I feel like we're going to hell.
I feel like Al is a suspicious sort of person, though. I feel like Sam is a much more trusting person than Al, so that kind of paranoia, I think, adds up to me. And the fact that he feels safe at the project, I mean, the project's kind of like an enclosed, isolated space. You don't have to be around people. Sometimes people who've been POWs and been in a tiger cage for, say, 8 years, this is something touched on in one of the later books, find comfort in smaller spaces. I don't know. I mean, maybe he felt safe at the project because Sam.
Yeah.
Sam's his safety, you know?
Oh.
It's an environment that he can control largely as well.
Right.
So that's probably a big part of why he feels safe there. And then he also gets to bone Tina whenever he wants, apparently.
Oh, yeah. He's mad that Ziggy's spying on him during sex. He's like, could you not?
Right.
I love that Ziggy fakes a cough when he's blowing cigar smoke, too. Like,
yeah, one thing that I did note, though, you might see it on the notes here, guys, is that it's another weird sort of sexual Donna thought. When he leaps, he thinks that he must have switched places with Sam again. That's why he hasn't seen Sam yet. And then he thinks, well, Sam is probably sexing up Donna real good because who wouldn't, huh? Donna, whoa.
Yeah, he's like, I can't blame him for that. I'll deal with this plane crash for a while because Sam's got to get laid.
And then he thinks about like, ooh, I'm jealous of him.
Well, him and Donna, they got something going on.
There's some stuff going on at the project.
When Al's thinking about that, he thinks about the leap back. He thinks it's been years since Sam went home. But if it's been years, that's past Mirror Image.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, I was trying to figure out in universe where this takes place. It just makes sense that it's sometime in late season 5.
It's past Leap Between the States, because he thinks about the Civil War leap.
That's right, yeah.
But if it's been years since Leap Back, then that would make it at least season 6. To make it 2 years, that would be past Mirror Image.
Maybe Mirror Image took place like way, way in the future of season 5.
Could be.
Who knows?
They had the Elvis episode, and then years passed, and then Sam found himself in a bar in Kochberg, and in between all that.
I mean, like, Mirror Image, I don't know if it really confirms that is the last time he ever sees Al or ever does anything with the project. It's possible they did more stuff afterwards until whatever the reboot says happened.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's true. I always pictured it this way. Maybe Sam never went home again, but that doesn't stop him from stopping in, if he's leaping himself, stopping into different parts of his friends' lives and at least observing them from a distance and knowing that they're okay, maybe doing nice stuff for them to help their lives along, because now it's completely up to him. He gets to choose what he does, so
Saint
why
Beckett
not?
Going around, saving everyone.
Yeah, and they might have seen him and they might have interacted with him, but if what we see in Mirror Image holds true, once he leaps out, they're not going to remember him anyway. So who's to say they haven't seen him constantly, but every time he leaves, they're like, who was that?
Oh, that's so sad to think about.
Yeah, but, you know.
This actually sets up something for Mirror Image. Gushy mentions if they can't find Sam, that they could do that tornado thing in the imaging chamber. This seems to be the first mention of it.
Yeah. Now, I took it as that was retroactively the way that they always established a lock in the imaging chamber. We had just never seen it before. So I don't know. You think that that's specifically if they have to do like a search to get a neural lock, that's when they bring that sort of tornado effect in.
Yeah, because I believe on the show, they said how they find Sam is they talk to the person in the waiting room and determine where he is from there. In Mirror Image, they certainly seem to act like this is not what Al has to do every time. It's a special circumstance because Sam is not there and they can't find him.
Al does not seem happy about it in Mirror Image. If he'd been doing that for 5 years, he'd probably be used to it by now. And in the book, he does say that Ziggy's usually able to get coordinates directly out of the leapies and stuff, so this doesn't seem to be a common thing.
And they don't have to do it anyway. This just seems to be a line, like, hey guys, remember when that happened in Mirror Image? Just letting you know that's a thing.
True. So that does firmly plant this at season 5 as well. What did you guys think, though, about Ziggy talking to both Sam and Al telepathically? I can find arguments for it and against it.
It would be so handy to be able to, if there are episodes set after this, it would be such a handy thing for Ziggy to be able to do.
Yeah, this would have been very useful on a lot of leaps, I feel like, if Ziggy could just directly beam into Sam's mind and say stuff. It just serves a purpose in the story because these two kind of need to know what's going on. There's very little about what's happening at the project during this whole book. It's basically just the beginning and the end. So they kind of just needed a little bit of knowledge. They could have done it. It could have been like them feeling it out, a leaper's intuition, if you will. Just like, what am I here to do? I don't have the project. I have to figure this out because there's some reason that I'm here, and kind of snooping around. That might have been some way to fill some pages other than descriptions of mountains or rescue procedures, which I gotta be honest. I appreciate the effort put into accuracy, but I was skimming over all of the rescue operation stuff, just describing where they're going to go and with the safety precautions and all this stuff. I'm like, I just didn't get anything out of those particular scenes.
Well, you say that now, Allison. Aren't you moving to Canada soon? You might need to know this stuff.
Yeah, if I'm ever in British Columbia, maybe I'll learn some stuff.
That's all Canada to me.
I enjoyed the survival elements. I love a good survival story. I love a good action story. They had a lot of that stuff in here, so there's a lot of exciting stuff to read about. I just didn't. I think Sam's side of the leap was weak, to be honest. I wasn't as interested in what was going on in his side.
Well, okay. Well, let me go back though, because I just want to stick to that telepathic thing just a little bit more. Like, I understand exactly what you're saying, Allison, because the convention of the show is Al shows up with the hand link, tells Sam what he's there to do, and then they go on to have misadventures as they try to solve the leap. And I feel like since Melissa gave you such a different premise here, there was no such thing as an observer to tell Sam what he needed to do or Al what he needed to do. So they needed to have that story convention somehow. Now, in universe, is it possible that Ziggy could find a way to speak to both of them telepathically, since they are somehow all linked together in this giant neural computer?
She's got the cells, the cells from both of them. I'd like to think that's how they're connected, and that's why Al was always the observer, and with Ziggy, it just didn't work so much. There was or with Gushy, it just didn't work so much, because there's something about Al specifically that seemed to work better. So, I could buy it.
I could buy it too, but I would have loved to have seen some stuff back at the project with Gushy and Tina saying, what the hell do we do now? And working it out with Ziggy on how they, how she could potentially reach them and making it happen back there. It would have given us some more project stuff to sink our teeth into and featured some of the, the fan favorite characters. But that's just how I might have approached it if this were my story. I'm not saying the story suffered because we didn't see it. I just think it would have been really neat to see. And the fact that we just saw it, I'm able to put all this headcanon in place to justify it. So I don't think it's too far afield from what we've seen in the series. I think just the straight mind leaping is a little bit further afield than this completely random different idea to basically fill in a plot gap.
Yeah, and they could have spent, or she could have spent some of the pages that she spent describing mountains instead doing stuff back at the project.
And they could have explained also why this was an unusual circumstance they couldn't always do. Like, we can have Ziggy project this, but it's not very accurate, or we can do this, but it uses a lot of power, or like something to explain why on the reg they don't hey, maybe Ziggy could give Sam some info. Maybe we don't always need Al around. Maybe we can do something or other.
I'm going to say it's because they were both there in the flesh, so to speak. It's not like one was a hologram, one was a leaper. They were both leapers, and she's connected to both of them, so she can maybe project because she usually uses Al as a conduit anyway. So since he's there too, she's just doing what she does with him, but in a different way. I know this is all, spitballing right off the top of my head, but again, there are ways that I think that you could make it work in universe.
I got it. Sam's gray streak is an antenna, and it picks up.
It picks up radio free Ziggy.
Yeah, she can broadcast through time, and he's got it.
Amazing.
It all makes sense.
Yeah, Ziggy learned how to DJ from Sam in Peoria, so she always was jealous and she wanted to give it a shot. And now here she is. It's for a station of 2. That's all, or an audience of 2. So now, how about the fact that there is 0 Swiss cheesing from Al in this sleep?
Yeah, what up with that? He's doing pretty good for a first sleep, considering Sam didn't remember his own name or nothing. Maybe it's because he'd already leaped once already. Yeah, maybe it's just the first time, and then now your body's used to it, and you're not going to Swiss cheese as bad in subsequent leaps.
I feel like it would have been too unwieldy narratively. It was just another thing that they would have had to have Al get over, and without the help of a Sam there or an observer there to steer him right.
I'm glad they didn't, because
there was no way to get around it,
Yeah, because they've already done this. You don't need to do it again. I didn't mind that he didn't have a lot of Swiss cheesing going on, because this is a great introspective Al piece. There's a lot of stuff where during survival situations he's got nothing but time to think, basically. So I think that there's a lot of good stuff in there for his character. There's a part where I thought it was kind of interesting. He thinks of Sam as his friend and mentor. And you usually think of mentors as it's usually kind of an older teacher figure, not usually a younger person, but he thinks of him as his mentor.
I found that interesting too, and I'm trying to figure out where in Al's psyche Sam is a mentor. Could it be an example that he sets? Could it be the... I really don't know, because they always make a big thing of the fact that, you know, Al was basically lost before he and Sam became friends, and it was their friendship that sort of put him back on the right path. So could that be what it means? I mean, this is the guy that saved me from, you know, hitting a vending machine with a hammer at the Starbright Project.
Yeah, he helped put his life together, you know?
Right. He's providing an example to follow.
Yeah.
He's providing a way to be productive again. I guess that could be a mentor-mentee kind of relationship, but I feel like it goes both ways. I think that Sam would consider Al a mentor as well.
Definitely.
Yeah, in the last book, he considered Al a father figure. So they're both kind of mentored by each other.
Aww.
Which is good. It's a mutually symbiotic relationship.
I get a lot of aw moments in this book.
It's very good.
Yeah. And I mean, wow. One thing that I found hard to buy, I guess, was skipping to the end, again, sticking with the lore. Al leaps home. He just leaps home.
Yeah, they don't explain it. That's a big part of this book, that he's stranded in time, and there's no explanation as to how he gets back home. He's just there again.
Sounds like you fucker. First time.
Lucky son of a bitch. It's funny because I just go a little bit behind the scenes when I was selling my book. As you may or may not know out there listening, I know Allison and Matt know, Al leaps in my book too. And Ginger was all on board with that story concept because it fit in with the plot that I was building. But she said to me, Chris, you're going to have to convince me how he's able to leap home. She says, I want you to do this, but we can't do it unless there's a plausible way for Al to get back. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, tell that to fucking Search and Rescue. But maybe this is what made her say, wait a minute, if we're going to do this, we can't cheat and just have him leap home.
Once was one too many times. You can't, let's learn from that and do something different.
Yeah, I feel like it undercut some of the survival situation a little bit, in that, like, part of that is not only being stranded in British Columbia, but being stranded in time.
Mm.
So how do you get back from that? That's such a dire situation. And then in the end, the explanation is nothing. And if they could just leap him home, why can't they leap Sam home? Like, you need to have, like, a reason behind this, why they could get Al back, but they don't say how that was accomplished. And if he did just, I don't know, leap back after whatever, like the leap ended and then he's just back in the imaging chamber, why didn't Sam leap back? It just doesn't... There just needs to be a reason.
Sam...
Let's do some post-creative reasoning.
Yeah.
Go, Matt.
Sam broke the rules by telling Peg he wasn't who she thought he was, which I don't think Al did in this book, right? He stuck to the rules.
He did. When he was hallucinating and shit, he was saying, I'm Al Calavici from the future.
Well, yeah, but all right, maybe no one believed him because he was just babbling a lot of rubbish. And how long was he there for compared to how long Sam was there in Genesis? Because we've got that whole thing from Revenge of the Evil Leaper.
2 days?
Yeah, the fact that there's the less time you spend leaping, the better chance you have of retrieving someone.
Yeah, so there's that line from Revenge, which if this was a shorter leap, they're able to retrieve him, which they couldn't do in Genesis.
I mean, what if they just leaped someone into Sam, and then the person they leaped into Sam has only leapt for like a day, and then they retrieve them, and then they got them both? I mean, like, if they know how to do that, then why can't they?
They open that kind of worms with Leap for Lisa, you know.
Exactly. Why don't they just take the person in the waiting room and leap them into Sam and leap Sam home?
Can't blame Melissa for that.
Yeah, no, I mean, the shows are very loosey-goosey. It's like, don't look over here. Don't look over here. Just look over there. No, I'm just trying to think, like, could it be? Now, leapers leap themselves. I have two explanations for this. GTF Dubs tapped Sam specifically to go out and to leap and to, like, work their will to make the world a better place. That life has touched others, and that life others. You've done a lot of good, Sam Beckett, and you can do more. You're my golden boy. Al Calavici. Oh no, magic lightning again. Well, this is not part of my plan. You go home now.
Things went extra caca. Like, get out of here. Boots him back in time. Like, get out of... You're not supposed to be here, Al.
That, or if you go on the post-mirror image rationale, leapers are leaping themselves. Sam doesn't want to come home. Al's safest place in the whole universe is Project Quantum Leap. He doesn't have his PTSD there. He doesn't have his paranoia there. He doesn't get mauled by a bear there. I want to go home there.
Maybe GTFW knew Sam needed Al helping him. So it's like, you have to be back. You have to help Sam. That's your place in this specific scenario. Also, Al thinks about the things that he wants most, and the two things he wants most is to see Sam home and to knock GTFW on their pompous ass. So maybe GTFW is like, get him out of here. He scares me. He's gonna kick my ass.
He's a bully.
He's a bully.
I don't know. I just thought it's interesting to try to figure out how and why.
Look, you brought it up. I cannot put this off any longer. I want to talk about the bear mauling. I have to talk about the bear mauling.
Well, I mean, yeah, I wanted to go into that next because we have a whole bunch of animal shit to get through here. So.
When I was reading this book the first time, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't read up on what happens in these books. And all of a sudden, Al is mauled by a bear.
Yeah.
He's running up a tree and a bear mauls him. So partway through this book, like, Al is horribly mauled. And then there's like, they're like operating on him in the middle of the British Columbia in the snow. It's horrific. It was so good. It was absolutely insane. Absolutely insane.
I agree. I love all that stuff. It's not Quantum Leap, but what the hell? It's fun.
You know what? If someone had told me, do you want to read a story where Al is mauled by a bear? I'd be like, give that to me right now. Give me the story where Al is mauled by a bear.
It's like, yes, please.
Yes, please. This is what the books are for. This is what the books are for. Like, they wouldn't show this on Quantum Leap in a million years. Although I would love to see that. But you could read a book and you're like, yeah, Al magically lightnings onto a leap with Sam and then survives a plane crash and then, what do you know? A bear mauls him.
Hey, you say we wouldn't see this on Quantum Leap. I think the new series is going to push us in some new directions.
Ben gets mauled by a bear?
Yeah, I think Ben's going to get mauled by a bear at some point.
Show us a bear mauling, a good bear mauling, you know? That's a creative way to get a character injured. I do love survival stories, and I love injury survival stories. You know, like the gorier the better. So, and this is gruesome.
Yeah.
They're talking about them picking through his leg in the middle of the snow. They gotta shoot him up with they happen to have a bunch of morphine around. That's real lucky that they have all these medical supplies. And then he's screaming and hallucinating, and he's got a fever, and he feels Gordon's body dying on him, and
a lot of out-of-body stuff going on, a lot of mysticism going on, but I think that all that stuff was pretty grounded in, I think, especially on Al's side, like a decent cast of leap characters, supporting characters. I got to enjoy his part of the story because I liked the characters that Melissa surrounded him with. They were all different in their own way. Of course, you had the requisite prick.
Yeah.
This guy Gideon.
But you know, this guy's gonna get everyone killed or something.
And we had, it sounded to me like, I don't know, I mean, anytime I hear an Australian voice now, I hear Hayden's voice, so the character Hugh Bassey sounded just like Hayden McQueen to me.
These accents were so bad. All the Australianisms and the Britishisms.
Wait a bleeding minute.
Kangaroos and didgeridoos. It's like, come on, man.
That's bloody ruddy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
This is, no.
Something about the way British people say ruddy. Do we? Do we, though?
He said bleeding every 5 seconds. Bleeding, bloody, bleed, bleed. This is not, you don't have to say it every sentence to prove you're British.
When Philip leapt in, the note that I made was early season 2 Buffy Spike. It was just...
It was bad.
When he steps out, he's like, wait a bleeding minute.
Oh. Yeah, he does it too much, and then like Sam also is thinking in Britishisms because he's leaped into a British guy. So sometimes he says things I'm like, this is just weird for Sam to be saying. Though there were some times when it seemed like Al was saying stuff like that too, so I don't get it.
We think differently to normal people.
That's for sure.
I thought was interesting. So this, the fact that this is a mind leap opened up some interesting possibilities, because when Al's mauled by a bear, Al, once he leaps back, he's not gonna be mauled anymore, so you could get extra gruesome with it, because whatever, it's gonna be left with Gordon anyway.
Yeah, Gordon's the one that's gonna be named for life.
Yeah, whatever. There's some interesting things there. First of all, Gordon is a heavier individual than Al, so he's kind of dealing with like being a kind of a hefty person, which becomes sort of a problem after he's mauled by a bear, and the other two have to carry him back.
Yeah.
And when he's on the ground, kind of out of it, he starts kind of merging with Gordon. Like their minds start merging. They're both described as feeling less than whole psychologically on a regular basis. It's kind of interesting. So he's like remembering all these like Gordon memories and his own memories, and they're kind of like blending together. The body is dying, so he's like dying with him. He has this sort of out-of-body experience where he's himself again, and he's looking at them, working on the Gordon body. It's kind of interesting.
And he looks down at himself, and he's just basically like a full-body apparition. He's just like sort of a floating spirit. And
yeah,
I thought that was okay. This is where the book sort of goes off the rails for me a little bit. But I don't know how I can really fault it for this. Now, there was a lot of like nature and mysticism, the power of dreams, the power of like animals, like this whole spiritual thing, right?
You mean magical Native American bullshit?
Can I mention again an entire chapter of a dream sequence? I've said that like 3 times already, but
yeah.
Yeah. Well, they have a few dream sequences that seem to be connected. They seem to be prophetic and not.
Yeah.
Like Sam dreams that he's mauled by a bear, which is kind of foreshadowing what's going to happen to Al. And then Al dreams that he's the bear that mauls Sam. And then there's
but the bear doesn't maul Sam, because what happens is Al is the bear that guide Sam to the crash site at the very end.
Yeah, the animals guide them to the crash site because they have magic medallions given to them by a mystical blind native man.
He who sees, thank you very much.
He who sees the magical blind native man. I don't know about this stuff.
I have him listed here as problematic plot device.
Yeah, I don't know. This is some of the stuff that isn't held up as well.
Yeah, I mean, and listen, I'm not one to talk because, like I said, there's some mysticism in my book, some plot devices that are problematic in hindsight, but this one, I felt of two minds about this aspect of the book because, all right, it's mystical, it's hokey, it's like, I guess if you're into that kind of stuff, spirit animals and like Native American magic sort of concepts. All right, so you have your out-of-body stuff. You have your dream. You have the dream plane. You have the animal stuff of the animals being spirit guides. That's a tradition. And while I'm not really, I don't know if I buy that. When you think of like leaping is basically, especially if it's just a mind leap, hand in hand with sort of mystical thinking. Leaping itself is kind of an out-of-body experience. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So isn't it like legitimate to approach the story in universe with actual out-of-body experiences to help guide the characters?
Yeah, I mean, I guess Sam got one in Prelude, so now Al gets one. Everyone gets weird out-of-body experiences.
But that's what leaping is, essentially. Yeah. I mean, if you're going to go with a mind leap anyway. Yeah. I mean, I think that it was more mind leap at the beginning of the series. It was, I don't know that they had, until they firmly established that it's Sam's body because it opened up better dramatic possibilities.
You mean the way they did in Genesis, yeah?
Yeah. Uh-huh. Sorry. Yes, like I said, very late in the series. Okay, everybody wants to hear this argument. Listen to every other podcast we've ever done. Moving on.
Fair enough.
What do you guys think about this aspect of the book?
It's such a... And certainly at the time, it was such a common trope. Honestly, even reading it now, it didn't bother me. It was just, all right, that's a thing. It's not great, but I could point to a million other TV shows and books that have done it, so fine.
Yeah, it was it's something that doesn't hold up that well. I don't know if it would be offensive. I guess I'd have to ask an actual like native person, but a lot of the aspects of Sam's side of the leap were just not very interesting to me. There was a lot of like spiritualism, talking about these animal medallions, and talking with Eric, who is the father of Lindell. This is the father and daughter that they're trying to get back together, and the father is dying of cancer, and he's kind of like bitter about it. So it's just Sam talking to this asshole for a lot of this book. And he's like, the animals will lead us to the crash. And I don't know if I bought that Sam would be into that personally. Like, yeah, of course, all these mystical medallion animals in our dreams are going to tell us where the crash is. But I didn't mind the dream sequences. I didn't mind stuff about sort of surreal Sam and Al seeing each other through time kind of stuff. I found that interesting.
Yeah, that was the stuff that I was glossing over quite a bit, especially that aforementioned chapter 7. I read through that like mad until suddenly there was all the guts everywhere, and like, okay, that's what this is.
I like that Al was having that dream that he's the bear and he mauls Sam, and he's like just so high from a fever that he believes that he has murdered Sam. He became a bear and murdered Sam, and he's just screaming at everyone like, you gotta go help him, like Sam's in trouble. He doesn't care at this point about revealing who he is. He's trying to like walk on this mauled leg, but he can't do it, and everyone else has got to like save him from himself, basically, because that's just how much Sam means to him.
And I guess, wow. Now that you guys are, discussing some of those aspects, I guess what it comes down to for me is, okay, some of that mystical stuff, that connection through time, that connection through dreams, whatever, because they mean so much to each other. I think that's sort of a plausible way to go about it, again, because of some of the stuff I said before. But what it comes down to is, even if it's plausible, does it work in the story? And I have to come down almost on, I guess everybody in the book came down on the side of no. They gave voice to how ridiculous it was, even as they were immersed in it. And as a result, I don't know that I ever really bought it. And I think, Allison, you saying that even Sam was just like, would Sam buy this? And even he was just like, I'm a scientist. I shouldn't, but what do we have to lose at this point? And he sort of gets giddy at the prospect of it.
Maybe it's that theory about how, like, when it's a more positive supernatural entity, Sam seems to lean toward that, versus when it's more negative, Al tends to lean toward that. Maybe that's sort of the thinking.
Yeah.
But it seemed like in the episode Freedom, which was involved Native Americans and some spiritualism, Sam wasn't really into that stuff.
Yeah, I'd have to rewatch Freedom to see if there are any kind of similarities. It'd be interesting because we'll get there eventually on our rewatches. So I'd like to keep this book in mind when we look at the aspects of how it was actually presented on the show.
Freedom plays with that a little bit because the actual Native American guy in it does kind of pretend that he's got some mysticism to it that he actually doesn't. So there's some good stuff in there.
I mean, it does seem that he knows more than he should, though. It seems like he does know that it's Sam and something to do with leaping. So they do kind of play with maybe it is a little bit real.
Yeah.
And some of it involves animals in mysticism as well. And he talks about like the cricket and leaping and different stories. And I don't know. So there is some precedent on the show itself for this sort of thing.
Yeah, there is. And if you guys stick around for that interview with Melissa out there listening, she does talk about this aspect of the book in her interview with Hayden. And spoiler alert, she's really into this kind of stuff. So,
all right. Well, I mean, and I don't know, does this play into actual like religious beliefs or spiritual beliefs that First Nations or Native Americans would hold? Like, I know animals.
I'm not the guy to answer that. I mean, outside of, say, popular culture, I did read a book called, I think it's called The Grass Dancer, which dealt with a lot of Native American spiritualism in different story vignettes. And this seems to be on par with that. I don't know if that's a credible book, but it seemed to be a credible book. So this is obviously a thing. We've all heard of spirit animals, I assume, right?
Yeah, because I don't want to make fun of like any like genuinely held beliefs by anyone. I just feel like in this book, it just felt very cliched and a little bit out of character for Sam to be so gung-ho immediately about like, yeah, I think these medallion animals are going to lead us to the plane crash.
I learned most of what I know about that stuff from Chakotay on Voyager, so, you know, I've got a good solid grounding.
Yeah.
Akuchimoya.
There was some kind of out-of-character stuff with Al, though, that I noticed. There's a couple times in the book where he's thinking about his mom. Like, he's thinking about, like,
You mean Mama Calavici?
Mama Calavici's boy. How she wouldn't want him eating that, or she told him that God would never throw anything at you couldn't handle. It's like, this is not what Al's relationship with his mom was like.
That was true until she ran off with that encyclopedia salesman.
Yeah.
I mean, wait, I can't handle this.
Yeah, I don't think, like, he would have many fond memories of his mom. I'm not sure how young he was when she left. Under 10, at least. And all the stuff about, like, well, God will never throw something at you that you can't handle. I mean, I guess maybe that would be consistent with his upbringing before his father passed away, but I don't know. I just felt like the pleasant mom memories didn't feel consistent to me.
I found that a bit weird as well. But we don't get anything, I think, about Al's mom in the books outside of her running away with that encyclopedia salesman, right, Matt? I mean, you'd be probably more versed in that than me.
No, I don't think we do.
She was Russian, or at least had some Russian blood. And she ran off with an encyclopedia salesman. Seems to be strongly implied because she couldn't handle the stuff with Trudy. They talk about that in Jimmy.
Yeah, but there really isn't that much.
And in Runaway, they do go into that a bit as well.
But so everything we get from Mama Calavici is pretty negative.
Yeah, he has some bitter thoughts about this, about the fact that she left all of them behind. So I don't know if he'd have these great fond memories about what food she wanted him to eat or what she thought about God, who he has a very complex relationship with as well.
I think that's more about the Vietnam stuff, though, right?
His relationship with God was complicated because he told him to pray for him, and when he had cancer, and he prayed for him until the day he died. So he really lost his faith in that moment.
That's right. Thank you for refreshing
that was from
my memory.
Leap of Faith.
Yes. Okay, with more evil Italians.
Yeah, but they do go into the POW stuff a lot in this book. I thought it was interesting after the plane crash. Everyone sort of sees Al as a leader because I guess the guy he leaped into, Gordon, has some sort of experience in this area, and Al too has a little bit of experience in survival stuff. But he's reminded of when he was a POW and other people were depending on him. I guess when he was a POW, he was kind of a leader in that as well. Some of the other prisoners looked to him.
I feel like this is just Al being a natural-born leader. I don't think you rise to the rank of admiral by not having some kind of natural charisma, organizational skill, and just ability to whip people into shape and to get things done.
Yeah.
So maybe they just all recognize that in him, or maybe it's just a vibe that he gives off without even realizing it.
Yeah, it's interesting because he is such a good leader, but he doesn't necessarily want people to depend on him like they are. Like, he kind of reluctantly accepts that role. And he keeps wondering through the book, like, he's like, I'm not a doctor. Sam's a doctor. Shouldn't he be in this situation? Like, he'd be more helpful in this situation. And then, like, but he was put in that situation because of his leadership skills.
But, you know, it's funny to me because that's one thing that they didn't actually say explicitly, but one thing that was kind of effed up about how the leaps wound up. Because when Sam asked who was on the plane, Eric said, well, Gordon is there. If Gordon is still alive, he's a pretty good survivalist. So they have a really good chance if Gordon is still with them. Meanwhile, Gordon is alive, technically, but Al has taken the place of Gordon. So their best shot at surviving was just, completely...
Maybe Gordon made the wrong call, though, because they all died in the original history. So even though he was good at survival skills, maybe he made some wrong call.
I think that I don't know that we can blame that on Gordon so much as we can say thank you to the mystical Sam-Al connection that enabled all of this spirit animal guidance to take place, where it wouldn't have in the original history. How's that?
Yeah.
I just don't want... Gordon seems like a good guy. I don't want to say it was his fault.
Seems like a good guy. He got mauled. He kind of got off worse well, I guess not worse. He was dead in the original history, but, he wasn't mauled in the original history.
Don't get much worse than that. You're obsessed with this mauling.
I love that a bear mauled him. It's just such a funny thing to imagine, like a bear, and then like Dean Stockwell running up a tree with a bear's chasing him. I just love the thought, but it is gruesome. It's extremely gruesome. And by the end of the book, I found it so interesting. It's not a happy ending, really. Like, Al is kind of has some PTSD over this. Like, he's thinking about this whole thing, like, just depressed, and he's got kind of, like, phantom pains from this mauling, like, he's limping, even though it wasn't his body that got injured. And he's like, well, I'm never gonna be the same after this leap, and he's wondering what all of Sam's leaping's gonna do to him. Like, he's like, if this disturbed me this much, like, what's going on with Sam?
Will he even be the same person when he gets home?
Yeah, that's such a like downer ending for this book.
It's in keeping with the character of the book.
It was good though. I liked the ending. It was just a very downer ending.
Yeah.
But this was the kind of stuff that I wanted The Wall to get into that it didn't. You know, when there was all these like psychological and physical and all this other stuff going on with Sam, he was getting beaten into concussions and he was breaking his arm and all this other stuff. And he and Al just didn't seem like they wanted to be bothered with what was going on. Like, it wasn't affecting them at all. And this stuff, in this book, it just gets deep into that kind of stuff. Lots of introspective things. Even though the plot could be summarized more quickly, there are like a little bit of excessive descriptions of scenery and stuff like that. But I liked that they had time to really think about this stuff, because there are portions where it's like, well, what is Al doing? Al is just like propped up by a fireplace with his leg all bandaged up. He can't really do anything at this point. You know, what is Sam doing? He's driving a ski, whatever, looking for Al. Like, he doesn't really have time to be doing much else but driving and thinking.
True, and I think that, you know, had Al leapt into Sam's leapy, the search might have gone better, because Al is a natural leader. He's probably got reconnaissance skills that Sam doesn't. I know that, Allison, you didn't like Sam's part of the leap. You thought it was the weaker part of the book, but I really enjoyed the character of Chris Gunn, who was the Royal Canadian Mounted Police officer that led the search and rescue of the title.
Right. She was part First Nations or something.
I think so, yeah, because He Who Sees was like her great granddad or something like that.
Right, yeah.
So she comes in, and then they introduce another character named Tom Greycloak, who they sort of imply that there's a romance going on between them, or that they're sort of really into each other. So, and he's got some First Nation in him as well. So they had those two characters on Sam's side, which I thought were like a breath of fresh air, because I thought the characterization on Al's side was so good. But then you're right. All we have on Sam is just Eric sneering at him throughout pretty much the whole book and being a total douche.
Yeah, it's an interesting relationship with Eric and Lindell, but yeah, it's just like, it just didn't have as much going on for me.
I have cancer and I'm mad. That was Eric's whole character.
This is clearly, I mean, I know we've spoken about this already, but this is clearly a book for and about Al. So yeah, the stuff going on in Sam's Leap isn't that fleshed out, but I'd give Melissa a pass on that, because clearly she made that decision that 20-30% of this book is going to be about Sam, so let's not do too much there. And what she did do there, yeah, I agree with you guys. I think the relationships were interesting and the characters were good. There's just not much of it.
I seem to recall another book that had Al leaping and some minimal kind of Sam stuff going on that one of us wrote, so...
What do you mean minimal Sam stuff? I had an entire Sam... It was perfectly balanced, thank you very much.
It was minimal current Sam stuff. There was a lot of past Sam stuff, for sure.
There are 3 concurrent stories going on in that book, expertly balanced and intertwined to lead to a dramatic conclusion that will take your breath away.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert.
Maybe I'll read that one in one go. Maybe I'll read that one in one go.
Quoting from one of the reviews.
Yeah, the one in my dreams. That one. There were a lot of dreams in this book. There are a lot of dreams that I had about my book, too.
You didn't have Al get mauled by a bear, but I do seem to recall a heart in a jar, which was equally gruesome. So, you know, the funny thing is,
I completely forgot about that until you reminded me of it. Thoroughly, completely forgot about it. So I can't wait to see what else I forgot about in my book.
Oh, here was a thing I liked in the Sam portion. One of the chapters begins, Sam's ass was numb. Because he's just been driving along for so long.
That cuts right to it.
Yeah.
And that was Melissa showing some restraint, because usually they would have been 3 to 7 adjectives describing how numb and why and where.
No,
So,
it's succinct.
Because
Sam's
of
ass
these
was
spots.
numb.
a nice declarative sentence. I like it.
Yeah.
Speaking of, I have some of my greatest hits, like with the overwriting. If you guys would be so kind, God, this one just made me stop in my tracks. Page 69, where they're doing the dream sequence, and this is Sam speaking. Al, I'm here, buddy. The words died aborning, trapped in the cage of Sam's lungs like captured animals. I have never in my life seen the word aborning. Can we look that up? Aborning.
Is that a real word?
Sometimes the descriptions like that, there's a lot of similes, like, and then it did like blank, blank, blank. It reminds me of like Garth Marenghi's Dark Place. It kind of gets lost a little bit.
I'm not familiar with that.
Oh man, Dark Place is it's the funniest show ever made. It's the funniest show I've ever seen, and it's a parody of 80s horror shows, I guess. It's purposefully done bad, but it's centered around this author named Garth Marenghi who wrote a bunch of horror novels, and it begins with him reading segments from the novels, and often they'll have just kind of overwrought similes or weird things like he'll be like, I felt
Very
when I was
familiar.
running, I felt very compact like a ham or something like that. Like there's just like ridiculous things. Anyway, I'm not making it seem as funny as it is. It's hilarious.
Gotcha. I have one more line that I loved that made me laugh out loud. It's actually 2 lines because it just makes no sense to me. You guys have to explain this one to me. And this is my favorite character in the book, Chris Gunn. This is when she gets Sam up against the tree and says, what's the deal with Eric? You haven't told me everything. And Sam's got to, admit that Eric has leukemia. And she's got him by the throat, and it says, he sounded like he was going through puberty again. Her anger was certainly enough to make a person do so. What?
Okay.
Oh no!
How does that work?
Okay, so he's got cancer. I'm sorry.
It's like, how can someone's anger make you go through puberty again? I'm a little confused.
His balls shriveled into his body. He was so scared.
I guess so.
He was scared of her. I did like that scene though. I like that she got pissed at him and she's just like, "What are you doing, man? Like, this guy has cancer. If I knew he had cancer, I wouldn't let him go on this rescue trip. Like, this could kill him."
And this could endanger us too. That's what I liked about it. Yeah.
There's a line that I really liked in terms of the overwriting, which is, and I didn't note the page number, but it's, there were no words to describe the pain that lanced through Al's left leg. And at that point, I genuinely burst out laughing and punched the air. It's like, there are no words to describe. Great, she's run out of words. Book over.
And you know what follows that is about 5 different descriptions of the pain,
Yes.
which I noticed. So
Yeah.
Man, very exquisite descriptions of pain. I liked when he thinks he's speaking, but he's not. Because he's just not thinking right, you know? Like, he's just thinking, like, did I even say that out loud? Like, and then they get him down from the tree, and he just, like, forgets he's part of the equation. And, like, getting himself out of this situation, because he's just, like, completely gone at this point. Just great little details there.
And did you guys notice that Melissa seemed to be really on her soapbox about how wolves don't attack people?
Yeah, they mentioned that a few times.
Yeah, about 18 to 35 times.
Wolves get a bad
She
rep, you know?
loves
She's repping for the wolves.
It's funny. That stood out to me so much in the book. And then I went and I listened to her interview with Hayden. And she mentions that one of the stories that she pitched for Quantum Leap had heavily to do with wolves and maybe even the possibility of lycanthropy being a thing. Which is so season 5.
Oh no! I would have loved a werewolf book. No,
I know you would have. I know it.
Melissa, if you got this drafted up, send it my way. I will read your werewolf book. I want to read this werewolf book.
Don't send it to Allison. Just send it straight to the 2022 production team.
You know, I found, this is a rarer thing, but I have found 1 or 2 Quantum Leap werewolf fanfics. But usually they're centered around Al because Werewolf of Washington.
Yeah.
So,
And that's funny because when they discuss wolves for about the third time, it makes Al think of werewolf movies. And I'm thinking, is that a slight allusion to Werewolf of Washington? Isn't that like very, very inside, tongue-in-cheek kind of deal? So slow
good.
Clap, Melissa.
Yeah. Oh, man, I can't believe we almost got a Werewolf Quantum Leap book. I would have loved that. Vampires get all the attention. Werewolves just get thrown to the side in favor of vampires.
I'm sure we would have had a season 6 werewolf story at some point.
We should have got a werewolf
had there
story.
been a season 6, maybe.
Yeah.
So it was one of the few that they had left to explore. We already had the zombies with the Mummy. We already had the vampires with Blood Moon.
Right, we had ghosts.
We had ghosts, right, for
Ghosts.
second season, yeah. And with Troyan. And we had demons with Boogeyman.
Later on, we get the sea monster stuff with Loch Ness Leap. It's a novel, yeah.
So we got our cryptids going here. We got Bigfoot, right?
Yeah.
So I'm thinking werewolves, they had to be on the short list.
We don't have any evidence that Sam didn't leap into a werewolf in this story, because on the cover he's got so much guy liner on, it's kind of like wolf-like, so maybe he was also a werewolf. Headcanon accepted.
It's a good thing the clouds were obscuring the full moon, is what you're saying, right? Lucky for Chris
I think
and for Tom Greycloak. Right?
Because this is such a heavily native-focused story, maybe he's a skinwalker.
What do they call that? A Rougarou or it's like arugula. I'm thinking of
it's an arugula.
Lougarou, I think it is, isn't it?
I think Lougarou is just French for werewolf.
I'm thinking of a first season Supernatural episode that I think was like their second or third episode, and it was named after skinwalkers, but it had a specific name.
There's Wendigos as well. It's not really werewolves, though.
Wendigo.
Wendigo is a cannibal-based thing, which is not a werewolf specifically.
Then
That's
I'm thinking wrongly, and I apologize for taking us down that blind alley, but Supernatural's a good show. Anyway, okay, what other observations do we got about search and rescue?
What you got, Matt?
So I love the fact there is maybe a bit of a riff on the end of Mirror Image at one point where there's a tabloid paper that misspells Sam Beckett's surname.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Sam Beckett. Yeah.
Oh, I thought that part too. It's more articles about Sam and time travel. Like that was in the last one too. It's like how many people were writing about him and time travel while he's working on a top secret time travel project.
It's true. It's true.
The picture in the paper, he's wearing these horn-rimmed glasses.
Yeah, what was that about?
Yeah, I don't know. And he's described as being in his 20s, but that's like from 1986, so he'd be 33 at the time.
Yeah, doesn't add up.
Yeah, I'm not sure. And it's funny because they have the separate magazine, coincidentally, that Al has the story in, right?
Yeah.
Who shows it to him, right? And he says it's a magazine that he loved their take on science. It wasn't still published in his time. And I would bet dollars to donuts, credits to Navy beans, to put it in Trek parlance, that Melissa was writing about Omni magazine, because I used to subscribe to Omni because it was just so funky. So I'm thinking it was Omni magazine. Melissa, tell me if I'm wrong, if you're listening.
On the subject of the misspelling, though, the UK edition does actually go on further and misses one of the T's in Beckett at one point. Only the UK edition, but there is a one T'd Beckett at one point. Which,
but is it in relation to one of the articles?
No. This is just
it's just a typo.
It's just a typo.
He just becomes that other Sam Beckett for a second, and we're like, yeah, we know who didn't leave home. It was that guy.
That one that never returned home.
Yeah,
exactly.
They say at the beginning of the book, until Sam's return, Al is the boss, and he doesn't need to clear any procedures or nothing. He can just do whatever he wants. So another confirmation that Al is the director when Sam's not there.
And they do mention Donna in passing. Don't see her, no job, no responsibilities. We still don't know what Donna does.
We never will.
So one of the things that I always find interesting, particularly with the novels that sort of try to explain it, but never really consistently and never really fully cohere, is what the original plan for the project was. Because we've had The Wall and Prelude that have both kind of implied that Sam is going to use the imaging chamber to watch people in the past, and there's no body swapping shenanigans going on. But apparently, in this book, we discover that one of Sam's first rules was that there's not going to be any physical contact with visitors from the past. So, was there a plan to bring visitors from the past into the future? It just adds into the whole mess that the novels create by all independently having their own pitch at what the project was originally designed to look like. And that's only happens because Don never actually established it in the series.
Isn't that so funny? We never know why this project, like, what the original intent was. This is the entire show, and it's like, what did they make it this time travel project for? I don't know. What was the idea? I don't know.
It goes wrong. We know what happens once it's gone wrong, but...
Yeah. I kind of like that because that's, once again, the parameters of the project serving the needs of the plot of this specific book. That's why Sam's body is in the accelerator chamber, not to be touched. And Al venturing in there is sort of against protocol. Oh, no, lightning. So, again, it's helping put things in place so Al can leap. And we never knew what the project was like, so sure. I can't imagine that they wouldn't have somehow switched places. If Sam is actually leaping into people, there's got to be a reciprocation. So,
yeah,
that whole he was just observing jazz, I guess it's one way to interpret it, but it's never been my favorite way to interpret it.
Yeah, fair.
They had some more stuff about what Sam and Al see and hear and whatever on these leaps. So when Al hears Philip speak as Sam, he hears Sam's voice but not Philip's accent. So he's hearing him say all these like British colloquialisms but not the accent along with it. I wrote this down and I'm not sure what I'm referring to. I said Sam does hear an accent when he speaks. So like when Sam speaks, he hears a British accent. Is that what I was referring to?
Yeah. I guess it makes sense because if you're just doing a mind leap, Al is hearing someone speaking through Sam's body, right? So I guess it's Sam's voice. Sam doesn't have an accent. Sam speaking as Sam is in that person's body. And he hears their accent because they naturally have an accent. It wouldn't make sense the other way because everyone would say, what happened to your accent, bud?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it would have to work that way because the one time we saw Sam leap into a British person, he was just speaking normally. He never has to speak in an accent at any time he is in someone who would have an accent, so...
Unless he's Dr. Ruth or Lee Harvey Oswald. Hands off, Cuba.
Yeah, if he's blending, I guess. Just for the audience's sake, sometimes he picks up an accent.
Yeah, I mean, that was an interesting exploration of sort of the mechanics there, but once again, it was very specific to this version of the universe. I thought it was fun and interesting to play with.
Yeah. What did you think of the British accents, by the way, Matt? Good?
It was American British accents. All the bloodies and ruddies and bleedings. Again, one of those things I'm used to. It's fine. I'm sure there's people out there that speak like that. I've just never met them.
Yeah, well, I have another friend who's the most British person in the world, and he does not talk like that. That would be too much for him.
Well, it all sounded perfectly natural to me. So
yeah,
I was the target audience. Good job, Melissa.
I got a factoid to drop.
Uh-oh. So you're dropping a truth bomb about the British accents and this not being particularly accurate, and now you got more truth bombs to drop?
Yeah.
Lay it on me.
So this again speaks to the overwriting thing, and I think some of it is, alright, it's difficult to read, but potentially works better when spoken. And that was how I felt when I was reading it for the first time. And then I learned that apparently Melissa actually read, I don't think she mentions this in the interview with Hayden, but it was definitely reported on at the time. Melissa read a few chapters aloud at the eSleep convention that year, and apparently it went down really well, and everyone loved it.
Hey!
And if you read it with that in mind, I can imagine some of the more descriptive stuff probably works really well spoken.
Okay, so I have two responses to that. I guarantee you I was there and I heard that. And I'm telling you right now that I have zero memory of it. But I'm sure it was lovely. I was going to get into this a little bit after I did meet Melissa once at an eSleep, so I'll talk about that later after the interview. Ooh. But yeah, so I'm sure I heard that and I'm sure I loved it.
Yeah, if you're at a Quantum Leap convention and someone who's writing a Quantum Leap novel is like, I'm going to read some chapters to you, be like, heck yeah, I'm excited. Read them chapters to me.
Yeah.
A quick aside, someone was telling me this story. I was just thinking about it, about how they met Dean Stockwell once at a convention. I forget what convention, but they asked him to sign one of their novels. And he's like, what's Pulitzer? What is this? And they're like, oh yeah, it's a book all about your character. Like, all right. Sign it with and put the little cigar smoke on it. Like, yeah, all right.
Oh, that's cute. I wonder if it was... Wouldn't it be funny if that was actually, Liz, who he was doing that to?
Oh, well, someone tweeted at me and said I think they would mention if it was her. I would have recognized the name too. But they said he was really lovely. Heard lots of great stories about people meeting them. But it is really funny when you think about like the actors involved with properties finding out about offshoot stuff that was technically about their characters, but they have no connection to. So it's just like, yeah, you got mauled by a bear and search and rescue and all this stuff. Like, what? This happened? All right. Especially Dean Stockwell. It's so funny when I hear stories about people telling them like, stuff about whatever properties he's involved with. Like he was doing Battlestar Galactica and he's like, yeah, it's a shame I got shot out in airlock. I had a good time playing this character. And they're like, yeah, you can come back, right? He's like, what? Yeah, like your character's a robot and then you can just make a clone and then you're fine. He's like, oh yeah, cool, that'd be great. And then he's like a recurring villain on the show. Like, yeah, like what? Anyway, this had nothing to do with search and rescue. It's just a random thing.
No, it's a good story though. Thank you.
Okay, a short one. It really annoys me when people in stories spell God Gawd, and this happens a couple times in this book.
That's because that's how they pronounce it. That's how everybody I know pronounces God. That's how I pronounce God when I'm not on mic.
How is it pronounced different than normal?
Oh my God. That's how it's...
Is that what they're saying? Oh my God. They're like the Rhode Island lady on SNL. Talk amongst yourselves.
See also double identity. If I'm lying, I'm dying. Oh my God.
I don't think anyone in this book talked like that.
That's a very Long Island accent.
No one in this book had a Long Island accent.
Oh my God, Jennifer.
Oh my God. Yeah, if the character if it was written phonetically and that was a character who did speak like that, fine. But it just reminds me of like being a teenager in like the early 2000s AOL Instant Messenger or something.
There was so much overwriting going on in this book. That was the least of the offenses. So
it's kind of funny seeing it like that because it makes me think of like shorthand teen speak when there is books like Adorning or whatever. Aborning.
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 And there's another one that I don't have a page number on this one, but Al says that Lindell's lips were as pale as liverwurst.
What? Yeah, what?
First of all, I don't think liverwurst is especially pale. And it's just, what a weird simile.
What an amazing simile. Love it.
Compact like corned beef. That was the quote from Dark Place. Anyway, what you got, Matt?
I've got nothing else. That's it. I'm done.
Ooh, now I can just go straight through the rest of the notes.
Snap them off.
Al introduces himself as Calavici to Philip in the beginning. He's like, I'm Calavici. That seemed weird.
It also seems like too much information. Like he could take that name back. Al is the most innocuous name you can think of. You don't want people to maybe remember a project in the future. You don't give them surnames.
Yeah, that just seemed kind of weird to be like, I'm Calavici, rather than just be like, hey, I'm Al, what's up? Like, I would find that weirder if I woke up in a strange place and it's like, I'm Calavici. I'm like, what? Al has some bleed over in this leap from Gordon, so that's part of why he has this deep connection with Lindell. I guess he'd kind of have to have this connection with her anyway, because immediately when he appears, the plane is crashing. She's like holding his hand like, hey, what a way to go. Like, so I guess like after you go through that with someone, you build some sort of connection, but I just thought it was kind of interesting, the bleed over elements.
Yeah. She played with that to great effect, I think, in this. And it's some of the more interesting parts of the book because it took us out of the overwriting and maybe explored different areas of leaping, especially as she set it up with the mind leaps in this book. So it's almost unavoidable.
Oh, there was another interesting part. Al, when he thinks that Sam's on the leap with him somewhere in one of the people in the crash, he's looking for him. And it says that he'd seen Sam in too many other skins to not recognize him instinctively. So in this book's universe, he sees Sam as the person he leaped into, and he just is so good at recognizing him now, seeing Sam beneath the person.
Yeah, that confused me a little bit, to be honest with you. It was almost like she was trying to have her cake and eat it too, because it desperately needed to be a mind leap because of the mauling.
Yeah.
You couldn't have that happen to Al. I mean, I think that's the whole reason that it was a mind leap, so that we could have that sweet bear mauling scene.
You could technically just be like, I don't know, he's magically healed when he gets back. Why not?
Yeah.
But at the same time, you don't get that wonderful catharsis at the end when they touch hands, and they don't have like the morphing effect like they would at, say, like an Evil Leaper plot.
I love when they touch hands, but you get so little of it. You're like, oh, they're finally touching, and then they're in the helicopter, and then gone.
Yeah.
It's how Mirror Image should have ended. They should have had that moment.
Yeah, they should have had that moment. This is the only contact canonically that they have, like, post-leap.
Yeah.
This is it. Unless I'm forgetting another leap. There might be another leap or something, but...
And it's not even really canonically.
Canonically, whatever you consider the novels. I guess there's some things that wouldn't really fit in with canon, but...
It's canon! It's
yeah,
canon.
They're going to mention it in the reboot. They'll be like, remember when Al was mauled by a bear? That was really messed up. I did find it interesting, too. Because this is, I guess, Al's second time leaping, he's kind of a novice, and Sam's sort of an expert. Like, Sam's been leaping longer than Al, so normally Al's the one that's kind of in charge. He knows what's going on. He's the observer, and now he's kind of stuck in this situation he's not as adept at. And Sam worries that Al's not used to leaping like he is. Like, maybe he's going to be in some trouble, and this is something he voiced in Leap Back as well.
Yeah, and I guess it's a natural place for Sam to go, but at the same time, I love the fact that Melissa wrote Al into a situation, into a scenario where his natural leadership abilities were able to come to the fore. So it's almost like there's some kind of hand guiding where they're going. There is a purpose behind all of this, and Sam's worry is, understandable, but there are bigger forces at play to make sure that, the people are where they need to be, even though it's a, quote, accident.
Yeah, I do wonder if this was a thought for Al's character. It wasn't voiced in the book, but maybe part of him thinking about like Vietnam and all this other stuff was also influenced by the fact that he crashed his plane before he was a POW. It was a plane crash that led to that. So this kind of parallels some of the things in his life.
I hadn't made that connection.
I love that detail. Okay, I got 3 more notes, and they're all small. There's a mention of Sam's uncle AJ?
Yeah, I didn't like that.
Who's Sam's uncle AJ? Is the J stand for John? Is there another John?
Alternate
it's
John.
It's not proper Quantum Leap if we don't throw in a random relative for Sam or Al.
Whose brother is that? Is his mom or his dad?
I gotta think it's Thelma's brother. Because. And what I didn't like about that is that it was a way for them to talk about, like Sam having seen or heard of someone hunting bear and seeing the bearskin rug.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's where that came up.
And the experience of that has put him off hunting, yet we see him shooting geese with Tom in The Leap Home. So I don't think Sam has a problem with hunting.
Yeah, it's a pheasant, I think, is what he was hunting.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I don't know, maybe it just felt crueler the way you go about it. I grew up in a hunting family. I never hunted personally, but my dad and my brothers did, so I got used to we had like taxidermy deer in the house and bringing home a dove and quail and stuff like that. I feel like in that case, it's like, if you're going to eat meat, if you're going to consume animals, then you can't really be against hunting. I think it's just ethical. Just be ethical about it. Be humane,
Yeah, I mean, I've never hunted, but I fish all the time. So
yeah,
I got no leg to stand on. I'm doing the same thing, so I'm not against hunting per se.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're just gonna like torture the animal, or if you're killing him just for a trophy, like you're not even eating, you're just like, I just want to kill something. I mean, like, whatever, man. It's just messed up.
Yeah, that's shitty.
Yeah, it was kind of a weird story. I don't know if that really fits in with what we know about Sam and his family, but that was something.
Yeah, that's the one character bit that struck me as the most incongruous of all of them in the book. Thanks for bringing that up. I had it in my notes. I glossed over it. So it's one place where I think she does go south a little bit when it comes to what we already know about the characters.
Maybe if it was the same bear, Sam wouldn't feel so bad. He'd be like, you mauled Al. Whatever. Yeah. Does Sam even know that a bear mauled him? Like, he comes to the rescue site and just sees him hurt. I don't know if anyone explains to him a bear mauled him. Didn't really have time for that.
There's other things going on.
They were too busy having a bromance at that point. So.
Did you ever find out? Like, you think they were on another leap, and then Al's like, man, this is worse than that time that bear mauled me. You're like, excuse me?
Like, what now?
What?
Excuse me?
What? All right, bring it home, AP.
Okay, they mentioned that the project has a yearly physical that Al is always avoiding.
Sounds like Captain Kirk.
So they have physicals at the project. For some reason. I don't know. For leaping? Like, they're like, we gotta make sure that everyone's tip-top shape?
Yeah, I don't know. To me, that sounds like, it's almost like they're on a starship or something. They're not in the service. They don't,
There's some sort of Navy involvement, though. Yeah?
I guess maybe some of the yeomen. Let's put it this way. I'm with you. I don't see why they would need yearly physicals at Project Quantum Leap.
But they have some sort of medical staff. I mean, they did establish that they have that in 8.5 months. So for some reason, they have a medical staff. Again, it depends on what the intention was. But if you weren't going to physically contact anyone in the past, I don't know why you're worried about having a medical staff. But
I saw the medical staff as like the school nurse.
Yeah.
The school nurse lets us... I mean, maybe there's lots of like little mini explosions with Ziggy.
Okay.
Gushy's getting flown across the room, and he's got comical big hair because he's electrocuted. And go to the...
Is it just as simple as they have health insurance as part of the government contract, and as part of the health insurance, they got to get checked out once a year? Like, Gushy, you need to lay off the food.
What is it like to be the medical staff at Project Quantum Leap, right? Like, it's like, what do you do? Oh, I'm a doctor. I work at a time travel project. I don't do any time traveling. I just happen to be a doctor at a time travel project. It's real weird.
I'm a doctor at an information redacted project.
Yeah. Yeah, there was, I was taking care of my boss, but he was a chimp today. Yeah. I did think there was an interesting, Gushy is described earlier in the book as having dark hair. That's inconsistent. He's not dark-haired.
Maybe it was just the way that the lightning made it look in contrast.
It was soot from being electrocuted from taking so much.
Exactly. Uh-huh. Take your pick. Make an excuse. Oh, boy.
All right, well, the last thing I have, Al wears contacts. You mentioned wearing contacts.
Speaking of what Al wears, this is in the first paragraph where she goes to great lengths to describe his clothes. And this is an indulgence of every author, me included. And
yes,
from now on, I'm giving myself permission to gloss right over all of that stuff. Because I'm trying to picture what she's writing, and I don't know enough about clothes to know the real cut of the jacket. I don't know. And then I said, wait, I don't care. Oh, it's ostentatious. That's all I need to know.
I love when they get into deep descriptions of Al costumes. Sometimes people just go way too literal with it. I feel like a lot of writers tend to fall into like too costumey sometimes. Like, and then Al showed up and he was wearing elf ears and it was Christmas. And it's like, I don't think so.
When did that happen?
Yeah, but I do appreciate when people take the time, because I'm like, what are we talking here? What is Al wearing in this scene? I need to know.
I find it so hhard to picture. So I give myself permission to just skip to the next paragraph.
It was some sort of peacock-colored outfit. I'll look it up.
What did the outfit? Long jacket, long tails, a lime green watch.
Long-cut, peacock-hued suit jacket flapped gaudily around his thighs. So it's like one of those long tailcoat kind of things, because it's around his thighs, so it's long, with metallic threaded material of pants and jacket rippling under the overhead lights in coruscations of violent, tear-inducing blue, green, magenta, and purple as he fairly danced up the steps like a psychedelic Fred Astaire.
Yeah.
This is the first paragraph of the book.
Much.
The first paragraph.
The first paragraph, there's 2 full stops in that whole section.
Amazing.
Calm yourself.
Ooh, shake it off.
This book was so good. I don't care about the stuff that was inconsistent. I don't care about the stuff that it's like, this doesn't make any sense, or I don't know why they would say this or why this would happen. I just enjoyed myself.
Yeah, she makes the most of it. It doesn't matter so much when someone says, you know what, I'm going to throw a lot of these rules out the window because I've got a good story to tell. And people can get away with a lot for that.
Yeah, this is what I love about Quantum Leap in general. If you can take a really insane premise but present it sincerely, this is the most bonkers off the wall thing, but place it in this world and be like, this is how this world is right now, and this is what's going on. You can really just get me behind most things, like this was an insane story, but I do feel like enough of it felt true to the characters, felt true to the world. There's some inconsistencies, but for the most part, I'm like, yeah, I could imagine Al saying that, or Sam saying that, or this going on in this particular instance. So I was ready to take the ride.
Yeah, and I concur. I think that above all, good, bad, or whatever, I think this was an interesting take on Quantum Leap. And I enjoyed the ambition. I enjoyed the scope. I enjoyed the cast of characters. I liked the characters I was supposed to like. I disliked the characters I was supposed to like. My only issue with the book was the overwriting, and I found it to be a constant stumbling block. There were really brief passages in the book where it seemed like Melissa seemed to be more emotionally connected or invested in the story, and as a result, she almost forgot to overwrite. It just became simple declarative storytelling, and that's when the book came to life for me the most. It turned from like almost an exercise in writing fancily into just actual good storytelling. And I just, if there's anything that I wish for this book, that it would have more of that, because I think it would have turned a book that I think is actually pretty good and pretty interesting into, an all-timer. But I can't get over a lot of the overwriting. That being said, I'd recommend the book to people. And obviously, we might be in a minority. She read it at E-Sleep. I was there for E-Sleep, and everybody loved it. So
I think a lot of people really enjoy this, and a lot of people who enjoy the Sam-Al dynamic enjoy this, because while they aren't together for almost the entirety of the book, a lot of it is about their relationship and how much they mean to each other. And it's a good character study of Al, and I think that's something not a lot of episodes of the actual show were entirely about his character, so it was really cool.
Well, guys, we managed to do it again. We're in like hour 2 of our discussion of Search and Rescue, so I'm going to close the book on the main discussion.
We're going to exit Pursued by a Bear.
Exit Pursued by a Bear. But don't worry, because the podcast is still aborting. After the break, we're going to feature that interview with Melissa Crandall. So everybody stay tuned, and we'll see you on the flip side.
The QLP is brought to you by listeners like you. Please go to patreon.com/quantumleappodcast and give as much as you can. For as little as $1 a month, you can be a contributor to the Quantum Leap podcast. It goes to covering our server cost and helps keep the podcast going. Thank you.
This is Ginger Buchanan, and you're listening to the Quantum Leap podcast.
Okay, everyone, we are back, and as promised, here is Hayden's interview with author Melissa Crandall.
Now there's a novel concept.
Melissa Crandall loves to write, well, whatever compels her. In the past, that's been fantasy, speculative fiction, and non-fiction essays. But since February, Crandall has been involved in a non-fiction project that she's very excited about. Crandall's novels include media tie-ins for Star Trek and Earth 2, as well as an original fantasy, Weathercock. Crandall's short fiction has appeared in the e-zine Allegory, the collection Darling Wendy and Other Stories, and in Amuskeg, the Journal of Southern New Hampshire University. Her non-fiction work has appeared in Chicken Soup for the Soul, the Journal of the American Geriatric Society, NARHA Strides, and ASPCA's Animal Watch. Crandall is proud to be a regular participant in the Exquisite Project at Bill Library in Ledyard, Connecticut, and this year also had the pleasure to be involved in Connecticut Humanities' The CT Caper, a story written in serial form employing the talents of 12 writers and artists from across the state. Until recently, Crandall maintained a semi-regular blog, The Wild Ride, chronicling her experience as caretaker to her mother, who suffered from dementia. She still drops in from time to time to write about the grief process or provide a shoulder for someone who needs to vent about their experiences as a caretaker. It's important to realise that you're not alone. Crandall is as drawn to essays as she is to fiction and enjoys the difference between the two. Fiction allows her mind to soar, to imagine, and bring to life the what-ifs that plague her mind. Essays make her pause to stock, to examine in detail the events she chooses to report. Often the two styles are intertwined, the introspection of non-fiction bleeding over into speculation of fiction, the creativity of stories sparking a memory that, in turn, becomes an essay. It makes for a full, well-rounded meal. But, of course, Leapers will know Melissa Crandall best as the author of the Quantum Leap novel Search and Rescue. Hi, Melissa. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi. Thanks so much for having me.
You're more than welcome. I just wanted to ask to start with, Quantum Leap's a really unique concept because you literally could come up with any situation you wanted to and turn it into a leap. Had you always wanted to write a survival or search and rescue story and decided to use Quantum Leap as the means to tell it? Or did it start with wanting to write something about Quantum Leap and then deciding to use survival or search and rescue as the theme? So in short, how did Search and Rescue come about?
That is a really interesting question. Both scenarios that you put out sort of happened at the same time. I have a very good writer friend who I have been collaborating with for probably 30 years or so. And we don't collaborate on anything for the rest of the world to see. It's just this own little universe that we write in for recreation. And we had done a story about a plane crash in the wilds of Canada and, had just done this whole thing. So when I had the opportunity to do the Quantum Leap story, I kind of started looking at that story that she and I had done and talked to Ginger Buchanan and said, what do you think of this idea? So I had to write up a whole outline of what the story would be about and kind of stole some of the characters that Pam and I had shared and put them into Quantum Leap and massaged it around, and that's what happened.
Fantastic. So how close was the final product to how you originally envisioned the story Search and Rescue?
Pretty close. There were certain things I had to tweak and change, but it was pretty close to the way I had originally envisioned it. My real goal in the story was to really give Al an integral part in things. He's always important to whatever leap Sam does, but I really wanted to give him the opportunity to see what it was like to leap himself and to put him in a situation of real peril.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm glad you mentioned Al because I can really tell it comes through in your writing really well that how much you love the Al character. Am I right in assuming that he's your favourite?
Well, that's interesting. When I started watching the show, I came to Quantum Leap kind of late in its run. A friend of mine recommended it to me, and I started watching it, and I got hooked. And when I first started, of course, Sam was my favorite character because Sam is who Sam is. But as time goes on, when you're writing that character, he's just so good all the time. He's always trying his best. He's always putting his best foot forward, even if he doesn't always succeed. But Al is really interesting because Al is so flawed and so broken in many ways. And that makes him a very interesting character to play with. So over time, I would have to say yes, that Al became my favorite character.
Yes, he's my favourite too, and for very similar reasons as to what you said. I think he adds some humanity to the show, whereas Sam's the overly good character who doesn't ever really seem to do anything wrong, whereas Al's the one who really makes the show feel human. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. He's the knight in shining armor to a real massive degree, and we don't really get to see a whole lot of maybe shades of gray with him, something that's a little darker. And Al's the everyman character, and I think because he's that, it makes him easier for all of us to relate to. Sam is someone for us to aspire to, but Al is closer to who we really are.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, to not spoil our listeners who haven't yet read the book too much, I'll just say there's a point where Al faces a near-death experience, apart from obviously the whole lot being a near-death experience. First of all, I think you picked a really interesting way for Al to find out what he looked like during this leap by, being having the out-of-body experience looking down on himself. I don't think we've ever seen that in Quantum Leap. But it really surprised me and actually upset me a little bit. But this is in a good way because something's good when you get emotional from it. Having written Al as quite a sad character who felt that he had very little to live for. And I really love that you made it that it was his friendship with Sam and not wanting Sam to fail and be stuck in time that really made Al want to cling to life. What brought on this poetic license and how did this side of Al evolve in your head?
I don't think I can take a lot of credit for that. The writing process is it's an experience of evolution as you're doing it. And I did not set out to make Al this specific way, but when I was writing that scene, it just seemed perfectly natural with the character. Through the series, we got to see really how much he loves Sam and how much he would do for him.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
It just seemed natural to me that's what would occur to him, that I may not be worth a lot, because we all know he doesn't think very highly of himself in a lot of respects. He's got a lot of insecurities because of his failed marriage and all the things that have happened to him. But knowing he's got this one true friend, and how can I let this one true friend fail? Because that's really what the show is about, is in a lot of respects, it's a love story between Sam and Al.
Oh, definitely. It really is the friendship between Sam and Al, which I think made the show what it was. You must have done a great deal of research about Native American culture in order to incorporate some of their customs and beliefs, like Chris's grandfather being able to see each person's spirit animal and having talismans which can help you tap into them, and trying to use the behavior of the animals to help navigate through the wilderness, all those sort of things. How did you learn all of this really interesting information, and how long do you think the research took?
The Native American research didn't take a very long time at all, because a lot of it was stuff I already knew, because I've always been interested in the idea of talismans and animal totems, and I'm very connected to the natural world. I like being around animals and observing animals and that connection that we make with them. The part of the book I had to do a lot of research on was Canada and British Columbia in particular, and where could I have this plane go down? And, it's one thing to say, I'm going to have this plane go down. Well, then you have to go, well, how are they going to find it? So I actually contacted the folks at Wells Gray Park. I spoke to, if I can do a shout out, to a lovely person named Ellen Ferguson, who she really went above and beyond, and she sent me reams and reams and reams of information on what they do within the park during the search and rescue, what type of helicopters they use, and just all this wonderful, wonderful detail that I was able to incorporate into the book. And the book wouldn't be half so good without her help. You
can really tell that you've put in your research, and I couldn't find any anachronisms, so big props there. Also, on the theme of survival, did you have to do a lot of research about how to write the ways that Al and his teammates could survive such a severe plane crash and get over injuries and stay alive when there's not much food and when it's cold, and stay motivated and ultimately be able to survive? And does it affect you writing such heavy subject matter?
I did a lot of research on that, because when you're working in a universe that's based in reality, to me, one of the things a writer really has to do is, there's a quote from, I think the writer was Eudora Welty, who said, always make sure your sun is in the right part of the sky, essentially. I'm paraphrasing. But make sure your research is right. And I didn't want to put something in there about survival, and all you need is one person who says, that's not how it really is. And you've blown it for them. And it's really important not to blow the story for anyone if you can help it.
Does it affect you writing such heavy subject matter?
No, I would say not. There are those who would say most of my subject matter tends to be a little bit on the dark side. I kind of see it the opposite way. Most of what I write, I think, ultimately is about human triumph and how we overcome, whether they're the demons that we carry inside of us or things from the outside affecting us, that I think we can triumph. And that's kind of what I focus on.
Yeah, and you can't have any light without the darkness, can you?
No, you cannot. They do balance each other out. And we see that again in Quantum Leap because Al and Sam are kind of both sides of that coin.
This is more a Quantum Leap novel series in general question.
Okay.
In the TV series, it's pretty well established that it's Sam's body that leaps, and he looks like the leapee because he's surrounded by their aura. But in just about all the novels that I've read which mention it, they pretty consistently show Sam's, or in this case, Al's consciousness as what ends up in the leapee's body. So when writing Search and Rescue, was this your interpretation of leaping, or was it mandated by the editors so that it could be consistent with the novel series?
I don't recall them mandating anything that I had to change. So I don't know whether I had, it's so long ago now, I don't know whether I had a real clear idea of what happened. I do remember debating the issue with friends for the longest time. Is his body really there? What is going on? Because nobody seemed to really know for a while there. But I don't remember them basically giving me a Quantum Leap Bible and saying you have to stick to this. But I do know that they've worked very hard to have consistency throughout everything.
Even though it might not be consistent with the show, it's still really interesting to read about Sam or Al trying to come to terms with being in a different body and trying to adjust to not having the same abilities that they used to have. So it's still very enjoyable.
Absolutely. I can't even imagine what that would be like to wake up and look in the mirror and that's just not your face.
Okay, well, moving on a little bit from Quantum Leap, what are some books that you absolutely love that may have inspired you to become a writer?
Oh, I think the very first book that inspired me would be J.M. Barrie's Peter Pan. That is probably the one book, no matter where I go and where I move and how many things I have to leave behind me, that book travels with me. What others? Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol is high on my list. That had a huge impact on me when I was very small.
I bet you must have loved the fact that Quantum Leap did A Christmas Carol.
Oh, absolutely. Everybody's done A Christmas Carol. It's such a wonderful, universal story. And it's that idea of redemption, that it doesn't matter how bad you are, you can be saved. And I think people want that in their lives, especially when bad things are happening to them. But, as far as other writers, I read a lot of Stephen King because I just really, when he's got a good turn of phrase, he can turn a phrase like nobody else can. I read a lot of Harlan Ellison, Jonathan Carroll, Barbara Hambly is big. I read a lot of nonfiction in all kinds of topics, so pretty broad spectrum.
Yeah, and the more you read, the more you know, so...
Well, and the more you read, the better writer you become. The writers I meet or the people who want to become writers who say, well, I don't have time to read, I don't really understand that, because that really is how you learn how to craft a beautiful sentence.
Now, our fearless leader, Albie, is a massive Trekkie, and he'd kill me if I didn't ask you about your Star Trek novels, Ice Trap and Shell Game. So could you tell us a little bit about them and the writing process?
Sure. Ice Trap came out of a collaborative effort with two other writers, Julia Ecklar and Karen Rose Sircone. Julia had been contracted to write Kobayashi Maru, and after she did that, they asked her if she'd like to do a second one, and of course she was interested, but she asked if we could do it as a collaborative effort. And so that's how the three of us did it. We essentially sat down one day and hammered out the basic plot and how we would break it up chapter by chapter and decided who was going to write which characters, and just basically took turns essentially writing a round-robin story. Once they accepted that, they asked all of us if we were interested in doing more of them, and I submitted a proposal for Shell Game. It was approved. I wrote the novel, finished it about 3 hours under deadline, stayed up all night to finish it, took it to Federal Express. I was there when they opened the door in the morning. I gave it to them, went home and collapsed. About a week later, I got a package back with this incredibly thick amount of paper that was all critique and notes. And essentially I had to, in 2 weeks' time, I had to gut and rewrite the novel in 2 weeks. And it was a great experience for me. It was a little panicking initially, but it was an incredible learning experience because it helped me learn all about things like focusing a plot line and where am I going with this and making sense out of a narrative. So they did me a huge favor in having me do that, because they could have easily have turned it over to somebody else and said, you rewrite this, or they could have said to me, you know what, we've changed our mind, give us our money back. So
yeah, all feedback is good feedback, in my opinion.
Absolutely. You know, it's just feedback is one person's opinion. You don't have to listen to it if it rings ill in your ear, but a lot of times there's at least a grain of truth to the feedback you get.
Yeah, that's very true. And often if one person thinks that way, someone else will think that way as well. So
exactly. And the criteria I use when I'm writing is that if somebody complains about something I've put in a manuscript, I'll make note of that to see what else happens. And if I get 4 people complaining about the same thing, then I know it's definitely a problem and I need to address it.
So what's it like writing for an established franchise like Star Trek or Quantum Leap as opposed to starting a new universe from scratch?
Well, it's a lot of fun to be allowed to play in someone else's sandbox, especially if it's a fandom that you really enjoy. And they've done all the work for you, really. You've got your set of established characters, and you get to make some secondary characters, of course, but you've got your basic characters. You already know what they look like, what they're about, what their personality quirks are. You know the mechanics of the universe and how it works. So they do, in a great respect, take a lot of the work out of it for you. The other side of that is you are constrained in certain ways. You might want to go off and branch out in a direction, and they kind of rein you back in and say, no, that's not how this universe works.
Yeah, and with Quantum Leap especially, they always go back to the status quo at the end of the episode so that you can continue with a brand new story next time. So
absolutely,
that must be very restrictive too.
They did as far as the program goes, they did an incredible job, and they served as a beautiful example for any of the writers that came along. I'm in awe of how they managed to do essentially a period piece every week.
Yeah, it was amazing, and they really made it look authentic too.
Yes, they did, very much so.
Quantum Leap was really unique too, in the sense that they could tell a story about the past, but from the point of view of someone who's living in present day, and you could comment on how wrong some of those things were too.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And you've got just that, it's that ability to, here's Sam leaping into the past, but he already knows about this past, a lot, some of it anyway, and knowing about it in the future and actually experiencing it are often two different things. So that was fun to watch his attitudes and opinions change.
Are there any franchises that you would have liked to write for but haven't had the chance yet?
If they ever decide to do a Game of Thrones franchise, I'm dying to be part of that.
Oh, yes.
But I'm doing so much of my own stuff now that it was a wonderful way for me to kind of cut my writing teeth, and I recommend doing it to everybody because it's a great way to learn. But anymore, I'm kind of focused on my own stuff. But yeah, all I have to do is say Game of Thrones and I'm there.
Awesome. Well, speaking of your own stuff, you're currently writing some narrative nonfiction called The Man Who Loved Elephants. So could you tell us a little bit about that, please?
About 18 years ago, I was a volunteer at the Washington Park Zoo in Portland, Oregon, which is now called the Oregon Zoo. And during the short time I was there, I got to spend an evening essentially babysitting the matriarch of our elephant herd who had undergone surgery and needed to be under observation. And I worked that evening with the senior elephant keeper, Roger Hennius. And it was the most amazing 4 hours of my life. I learned so much in talking with him, and it just impacted me enormously. And for the 18 years, I've been thinking about that. And I wanted to write a short story about an elephant who has died and is waiting for her keeper to join her. And I decided to do a little research on how they keep elephants. I had no real information about the zoo, and it had been so long since I'd been there. And one thing led to another, and somebody put me in touch with Roger. And the more I talked to him, the more I realized that there was a far deeper story here than one little short story could hit. So I began interviewing him last February. We've talked at least once a week, sometimes twice a week, ever since then. And we're now in the second draft his story.
Fantastic. So when do you think it might hit the shelves?
Right now, I don't even have an agent for it, so that's impossible for me to say. I do have 2 small press publishers who have expressed an interest in it. I am hoping to shop it out to a few agents and see if I can get any nibbles there. So it would be nice to say next year, but if the way, the publishing system goes now, if I'm lucky enough to sell it, it might be a couple of years down the line. It's hard to say.
You've also written a blog, The Wild Ride, Caretaking Mom Through Alzheimer's. Could you tell us a little bit more about that, just because it might help someone who's going through a similar experience?
Well, the blog originally started out as just kind of my observations on everyday life, had nothing to do with Alzheimer's at all. And a couple of years ago, it's probably going on 3 years ago now, after my dad passed away, it became very clear that my mom could not live on her own. And so my husband and I decided to take her into our home. And Alzheimer's being the progressive disease that it is, you're kind of going along and you think, well, they're not doing too badly. Everything seems great. And all of a sudden the world drops out from under you. And it really is a roller coaster. You'll have really, really bad days. And then you've got days where if you look at them out of the corner of your eye, you'd swear that they were completely the way they used to be. So there was a lot of up and down, a lot of emotional stuff. And for me, writing has always been a way for me to stay sane and to put my world in perspective and to lay out my problems and maybe figure out a way to solve them. And I joined a support group, an Alzheimer's support group, and a woman who was a member suggested that someone needed to start a blog. She didn't know I was blogging at the time. She said, somebody needs to start a blog to document this wild ride. And the little lights and bells went off in my head. And I went home and got my blog out and changed the name of it to The Wild Ride and just started writing about Alzheimer's because it's necessary for people to have an outlet. People try so hard to say, I've got to be patient all the time. I can't be angry. I can't express my real emotions. And you need to say, I'm angry. I'm hurt. I'm furious. I'm destitute. Whatever emotions you're feeling, you need to get those out. And that's really what I was trying to do with that blog, is to almost give other people permission to feel the pain that they were feeling.
Where can our listeners go to read what you've written there?
That is on WordPress. It's melissacrandall.wordpress.com.
Great. Let's go back to Quantum Leap a little bit now. Do you know if Search and Rescue is going to be made available in ebook form?
Oh, I have no idea. You're hired to write the story, and what happens with the story beyond the time that you turn the manuscript in, you don't really know about. So I have no idea what plans there might be for Search and Rescue at all.
Well, let's hope they do at some point.
I think if they get the sense that people really want it, I don't want to start a letter writing campaign to, the publishers or anything, but I think if people make it known that, yeah, hey, we would like to have these, it could happen.
Did you ever feel any extra pressure writing about what's become one of the most beloved series on the planet?
Surprisingly, no, because at the time I did it, I don't want to say the fandom was small, but it was smaller than I think it is now, and it's become so vast. So I didn't really feel that pressure. I was writing for the sheer joy of playing with characters that I had come to love, so I didn't really feel that at all.
And what's your favorite part or aspect of Quantum Leap?
Oh, I think it's the human relationships. It's really the relationship between Sam and Al. To me, everything that happens on that series comes back to that central relationship.
Absolutely. And I'm really glad that after everything that Al did for Sam throughout the series, Sam finally helps Al get his happiness right at the very end. So.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, because I was thinking of that the other day and remembering watching the final leap. And I have only seen it once. I watched it when it first aired. And like a lot of fans, I was absolutely furious by the end of it. And I think I still am. It's like, I just think that Sam could have done what he did for Al and not have to sacrifice himself in the process.
Yeah, there are a lot of interpretations of that final episode, and it was really cleverly written in such a way that people are still talking about it 25 years later.
I prefer to think he's out there still leaping, but on the other hand, it's like, God, can you just let the poor guy go home?
Yeah, it's definitely a double-edged sword, isn't it?
It really, really is. It was a beautifully crafted script. It was beautifully acted. It had wonderful secondary characters, but it was just heartbreaking at the end. You know, when the final titles rolled, you could hear this agonized psychic scream all across America with people going, wait a minute!
Yeah. Have you written any other Quantum Leap stories, or do you have any plans to write another? And if so, where would you have Sam or possibly Al leap to next?
I don't have any plans to do any more. I did originally, when I submitted the story proposal for Search and Rescue, I submitted 5 or 6 all at once, and Search and Rescue was the one that they chose. But there was one I really wanted to do that, I know you're asking me to remember back a long time, but I remember it had something to do with wolves, and I really wanted to put a kind of a thread of a query in there as to whether or not lycanthropy was real. But that's not the one they picked.
Hopefully at some point they'll bring back Quantum Leap and bring back the series, and we'll get to hear everything else that you've got to say.
You know, the thing is, though, if they were going to bring it back, they'd probably want to cast all different actors, and I just can't imagine anybody but Dean Stockwell and Scott Bakula playing those parts.
Do you have anything you'd like to say to your readers before we go?
Keep reading, keep enjoying. Let me know if there's something you'd like me to write.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Melissa. I had a fantastic time.
Thank you for having me. This has been terrific.
If Melissa's listening to this podcast, you're a mad woman. I love it. Thank you for writing this book.
Yeah. That was a great interview, wasn't it? She's such a good person.
Yeah.
She's just so upbeat, and she just loves Quantum Leap like we all do so much. So I'm just happy that we're able to get her on the show to talk about, the selling of the book, and gosh, that werewolf thing. It just, man.
So close.
It's really,
Send me the outline of your werewolf book.
For those of you interested in some of the other work that Melissa discussed in that interview, I know it's a couple of years old. It was like before the pandemic, but she did follow through on all that stuff, and she's still an active author and storyteller, and you can find out everything she's up to these days on her website at melissacrandall.com. So I had mentioned earlier, guys, that I did meet Melissa briefly at one of the East Leaps, and it's one of my most embarrassing memories. I have to say.
Oh, yeah?
Ooh. Yeah, because I was, okay, this is pretty much how it went down. I remember her being lovely, and I remember her coming up and introducing herself, and I was just thrilled to be there and to meet everybody. And she said, so tell me, who is your favorite Quantum Leap author? Or no, she said, what is your favorite Quantum Leap book? And in my mind, I was just joking around, but I think it came out like I sounded serious, like I'm a total douche, because I said mine, because I wrote it. And then I, just silence, like crickets. And I was just like, that was meant to be a joke, but maybe I sounded like I meant that.
Maybe you kind of meant it.
No. And then I'm horribly backpedaling, going, no, I'm just kidding. No, and it's just like, I could tell I already lost her. Like, wow, this guy's a real dick, but maybe not. I don't mean to put any kind of words into Melissa's mouth. She was perfectly lovely throughout the entire weekend, and I was happy to meet her. But I think back on that, I'm like, wow, I was such a douche.
Oh, I bet she doesn't even remember that.
Now she does.
yeah, she'd be like, oh man, I did think that.
That asshole. So, Melissa, if you are listening, I'm sorry. I meant it to be a joke. I don't think it came out very jokey, and mea culpa, all right?
Exercising some 25-year-old demons there, Chris. Yeah. That's what the podcast is all about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, thank you, Melissa, for that interview, and thank you again for Search and Rescue. We also have someone else to thank, guys. We have a returning patron. So I just wanted everybody to give it up. Woohoo!
Yay.
To Katie Hogan. Katie is returning as a $5 leaper. She dropped off for a while. She's back now. She just gave me a heads up, and I wanted to say, here's your new shout out, Katie. Thanks for coming back. We're so happy to have you aboard, especially as we go in for the reboot. You're helping us a lot. So I was pretty much at a loss for any kind of real feedback this time. We kind of used it all up in Double Identity, and it's funny, I was tooling through some of the YouTube comments, and there was one that was specific to the book series. It's short, it's sweet, but I thought it was pretty cool. It was from a person named Whitney Kugel, and it was in response to the wall show that we did. And Whitney wrote very briefly, I remember reading this nearly 20 years ago. Recently just bought 14 other QL novels since I've already got 3 others.
Whoa.
Cool.
Yeah, right? And looking forward to reading these new ones as I've been waiting to read them for 2 decades. So, Whitney, if we had a part to play in you rediscovering the books and going out and getting them all, we're so happy that you're here joining us for the Quantum Leap Podcast Book Club. And, hey, just think about what a beautiful addition to your Quantum Leap book collection would be, a Quantum Leap Book Club bookmark, which you can get by supporting us at the $3 level at patreon.com/Quantum Leap Podcast, always be selling. So if you would like to be like Whitney, there are many ways that you can reach us here at the Quantum Leap Podcast. You can drop us a line at P.O. Box 542, Bayport, New York, 11705. You can call us on the phone at 707-847-6682. You can email us at quantumleappodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/quantumleappodcast. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at quantumleappod. And you can always go that extra mile and support us on Patreon at patreon.com/quantumleappodcast. Just remember that we may use your response on an upcoming episode of the Quantum Leap Podcast. And speaking of upcoming episodes, Matt, what news do you have for us on this front?
Well, it seems the Patreon supporters have been continuing to vote, and it looks like the next episode we're going to be talking about is The Colour of Truth.
There's gotta be some mistake.
Biggest mistake you'll ever make, boy. Ain't that right, Toad?
Right as rain, Billy Joe.
That's the next episode in line anyway, right?
Certainly is.
I think it will always be in order.
That's fine. That's fine. We can deal with that.
I put up that poll every once in a while when it's time to vote on a new episode, and they've pretty much spoken, haven't they? They have not been leaping randomly around. I think everybody just wants us to cover the episodes in order. But I will continue to put that poll up because it gives us the illusion of Patreon content. So it's a very easy post for me.
We got lots of great Patreon content. We don't just have polls though. We got Fangens, we got Leaps Elsewhere, we got lots of exclusive Patreon content. So if people are wondering what is available, what do I get out of this besides a bookmark? Well, there is extra content where we talk about all sorts of stuff, and those are very entertaining shows, I must say.
Absolutely.
My new favorite shows are the Oh Boy interviews, where I talk to patrons about their Quantum Leap fandom. I just completed another one, which is available now on the feed with our supporter Ann Dumas, and she was a delight. And just it's so terrific to connect with fans and to really build up the community over there and talk to the people who are actually listening to us and who love Quantum Leap as much as we do. So always a lot of fun, and especially a Bakula Star Trek fan as well. So I talked to her a bit about Enterprise because I'm an Enterprise geek myself. So it was a lot of fun.
Nice.
Cool. You go check that out over at Patreon. You know, the Patreons. So, all right, guys. Oh, wow. So we got to talk about Jesse Tyler.
That's the guy that Sam leaped into 300 million times, I think.
Yes.
About that, yeah.
Yeah, we need to, if we're going to carry on doing this in leap order, we need to also talk about this another few times during season 2.
Yeah, every time it leaps out at the end of a season 2 episode, then we have to talk about Colour of Truth again.
Yes.
Yeah, that's going to get tricky.
This guy again.
This is an important episode of Quantum Leap, a seminal one. It's the beginning of a trend that they did in the series. The first time they really did kind of an issues episode. So yeah, it'd be great to go back and talk about that one.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to sinking our teeth into this one because it really does establish a lot of what makes Quantum Leap. So it's going to be good. It's going to be good. So until that time, I have been Christopher DeFilippis.
I've been Allison Pregler.
And I've been Matt Dale.
And we'll see you next time. Once again, the podcast will be a warning.
Exit pursued by a bear.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Quantum Leap podcast, hosted by Allison, Matt, and Chris, with voice talent and contributions from Hayden McQueenie and Zoe Dean. To support the show, please go to patreon.com/Quantum Leap podcast. The executive producer of the Quantum Leap podcast is Albert Burge. Christopher DeFilippis and Hayden McQueenie are the co-executive producers. Special thanks to our producers, Chris, aka Brackmang, Mike Covert, Joshua Burwald, Jeff Kiska, Craig Riedler, Cosplay Dad, Charles Allen Gossard, and Morgan Felden. The thoughts expressed on this podcast are those of the individual and do not necessarily represent those of the Quantum Leap podcast, its partners, or affiliates. The Quantum Leap universe and all it contains is the property of Belisarius Productions and Universal Television. The Quantum Leap podcast is not affiliated with Belisarius Productions or Universal Television, and no copyright infringement is intended. The Quantum Leap podcast is a Barren Space production.
So I turned off the air conditioner, so I might be sweating by the end of this. We'll see. All right.
Yeah. I always get the podcast sweats. Like you just you turn off the air conditioning, and then like just the energy of doing a podcast, and then by the end it's like, ew, need the AC on.
More information than we needed.
Last week I turned it off and then I forgot to turn it back on and we came up to go to bed and it was just like stifling up here. It was awful. And Laura's just like, don't do that again. It's like, sorry. Art has its demands.
Now, Matt, I know this is an alien concept to you. In the States, we have a thing called air conditioning.
Oh, what now? We need to bring that out over here.
It's a magical device you can turn on and it changes the temperature in your home.
When you get your mind around that and you wrap your brain around that, we're going to introduce you to the concept of ice cubes.
Screw you, man. We have ice cubes here. Air conditioning, though. Our houses predate climate change. That's the only problem.
What's your opinion on iced tea?
I'm not a big fan of iced tea. I love cold coffee type things like frappuccinos and frappes and stuff. I'm all about that. Teas, though, teas should be hot. I don't get that. Where did that come from?
It's like, just because tea's a very British thing, but it's usually warm tea. But see, I grew up with parents that came from the South, and like sweetened iced tea is just like the big thing there. So it's just like,
fair enough.
I'm not really big into the sweetened tea much anymore because it's just like you just dump a truck ton of sugar into it.
Right?
Y'all want some sweet tea, and it's just too much. But
I do put a lot of sugar in my tea. And my coffee.
I feel extra fancy when I'm having like warm tea and then you put like a little bit of milk in it. And I do put a little bit of sweetener in it, just not as much as like
to make you feel a little British.
Yeah, I like having tea a little British.
Is this prepping you for the podcast with the British Leapy? Just trying to
let's jump into that. Oh, I'm excited. I'm stoked. I've been so stoked.
Yeah, I could go off on a half an hour tangent about tea.
I think Melissa Crandall could as well. Wait a bleeding minute!
Kangaroos and didgeridoos!
That's bloody ruddy, isn't it?
Bleeding, bloody, bleed.
Oh my god, Jennifer.